Even an old pair of shoes would be enough. Annie tried to keep her voice calm. Sir, I'm not asking for much. Just an old pair of shoes would be enough. Any pair nobody wants anymore would be fine. Richard Whitmore looked at her, then glanced toward the trucks parked along the curb. The giveaway is over, Richard said. His voice was not irritated, only tired, like a man who believed everything that needed to be done had already been done. The food is gone, the coats are gone, the shoes are gone too. Come back next year, all right? Men in work gloves were loading folding tables, empty boxes, and the last donation signs into the trucks. One truck had just pulled away from the Greenwich Community Center, its tires crunching over the thin layer of snow. Annie stood beneath the weak parking lot lights, pulling her thin coat tightly across her chest. She looked past Richard's shoulder toward the empty tables, where only a short time earlier there had been canned goods, blankets, gloves, socks, and winter shoes. Now all that remained were strips of tape, a few flattened cardboard boxes, and volunteers hurrying home. Annie rubbed her hands together. She was shaking so badly she could not hide it. Is there really nothing left, sir? She asked. Her eyes grew wet, but she fought to hold back her tears. I'm not asking for a whole bag of things. I'll leave right after. I only need an old pair of shoes. Torn ones are fine. Dirty ones are fine. If they have holes, I can fix them. Richard opened his mouth to answer, but before he could speak, Victoria Whitmore stepped forward. She stood near the black SUV, wearing a pale wool coat, looking at Annie with the irritation of someone staring at a stain that had just appeared on a freshly cleaned floor. Her lips pressed into a hard line. He already told you to come back next year, Victoria snapped. Good grief, this girl is stubborn. Annie flinched and tightened her grip on the strap of her canvas bag. I'm sorry, ma'am, I didn't mean to. You heard him, Victoria cut in, stepping closer. The event is over. People like you always show up when everything is finished. When the cameras are off. When there is no one left to check whether the story you are telling is even true. Richard frowned. Victoria, but she had already moved close to Annie. Her hand pressed hard against Annie's shoulder, shoving her backward. Annie lost her balance. Her bare feet slipped on the icy edge of the curb, and she dropped to one knee with a small cry she tried to swallow. Her canvas bag slipped from her hand. A folded work apron, a bus ticket, and a small plastic bottle of pain relievers spilled into the snow. For a moment, no one moved. Then a woman standing near the last donation truck cried out, "Did she just push that girl?" Another volunteer, an older man wearing a red scarf, turned sharply. I saw it. Poor thing was only asking for an old pair of shoes. She wasn't asking for money, someone else said. Just shoes. Annie's face burned. She quickly reached for her things, her hands trembling as she picked up the bus ticket before the snow could. I'm sorry, Annie said, her voice weak. I'll go. I'll leave right now. She tried to stand, but immediately winced. One foot came down on a patch of salted ice, and a sharp pain shot up into her ankle. She pressed her lips together, fighting not to cry again. Richard's gaze slowly dropped. Only then did he see the full truth. Annie was barefoot. No sneakers, no socks, nothing at all between her skin and the frozen pavement. Her feet had darkened from the cold. Her toes were stiff and curled. Thin cuts marked her heels where the rough ground had scraped the skin. A faint red streak appeared near the place where she had just slipped. Richard stood frozen. Where are your shoes? He asked. Annie held the bag against her chest, her eyes lowered. I don't have any, sir. You came here like this? I had to. From where? From the laundromat on East Putnam. Then I took the bus. After that, I walked from the stop. She pulled her coat tighter around herself, as if that could somehow hide her feet. I thought I would get here before the giveaway closed. Victoria drew in a sharp breath. And now we are supposed to believe you walked barefoot in December weather? Annie looked up at her. You don't have to believe me, ma'am, she said. I only asked because I truly didn't know where else to go. Those words silenced the small group gathered near the truck. Richard suddenly remembered his own speech from less than 2 hours earlier. No one should be left behind this winter. All those beautiful words now felt like a door slammed shut in the face of the girl standing before him. Samuel, Richard called. His driver, Samuel Reed, lifted his head from beside the SUV. Yes, sir? Open the back door. Victoria immediately stepped in front of him. Absolutely not. Richard's voice remained calm. Move aside, Victoria. She looked at him in irritation. For a stranger? For a human being. Samuel opened the rear door of the SUV. Richard leaned inside and pulled out a pair of sneakers he usually kept for morning walks whenever he stayed in town. They were old, but sturdy, warm, and far too large for Annie. He brought them back and set them down in the snow in front of her. Annie looked at the shoes, then at him. Her lips trembled. "Sir, those are your shoes. They are yours now." She shook her head, ashamed that the gift was far more than she had dared to ask for. "I only ask for something nobody needed anymore. I don't need them anymore." Richard removed the wool scarf from around his neck, folded it, and tucked part of it into the toe of one shoe. Samuel quietly took a clean towel from the SUV and handed it to him. Richard used it to pad the other shoe. Victoria gave a bitter laugh. "This is ridiculous." Richard did not answer. Annie slipped her frozen foot into the first shoe. She winced as the warmth touched the cracks in her skin. Then she put on the second one. The shoes looked strange on her feet, too large and too heavy. But when she stood, the freezing pavement no longer touched her skin. For the first time since she had stepped into that parking lot, Annie truly breathed out. "Thank you," she said, her voice almost drowned out by the rumble of a truck engine. "I'll bring them back when I can." "No," Richard said. "You won't." He reached into his wallet and took out several bills. Annie immediately shook her head. "No, sir. Please don't. I didn't come here for money." "I know." Still, he held the money out to her. "For food. For a taxi. For whatever you need tonight." Behind him, Victoria gave a quiet sound of disgust. Annie heard it. Her face tightened, and for a moment, she almost wanted to take the shoes off. "I don't want to cause trouble." Richard looked toward the empty stage, the fading lights, and the trucks carrying away the last pieces of a charity event that had been neatly packed up. Then he looked back at Annie. "You are not causing trouble," he said. "You only came after we had stopped pretending we still cared. That is not your fault." Annie took the money with both hands. Not quickly, not greedily, carefully, as if she were holding something both necessary and painful. The last truck rolled toward the exit. Snow began to fall again, thin and soft beneath the parking lot lights. Richard stood still, watching Annie walk toward the bus stop in shoes far too large for her small feet. The bus stop sat at the far edge of the community center parking lot, beneath a warped metal shelter with a long crack running down one side of its plastic panel. Annie walked toward it in Richard's oversized shoes, lifting each foot carefully so they would not slip off. With every step, the heel of each shoe rose slightly before dropping heavily back into the snow. In one hand, she clutched the money. In the other, she held her canvas bag. She did not know where to put either one. She did not know whether she was supposed to feel grateful or ashamed. Behind her, Victoria's voice rang out, sharp enough to cut through the night. "Have you lost your mind, Richard?" Annie kept walking. "You are a billionaire," Victoria hissed. "A man with a company, a board, and a reputation. And yet you bent down in the middle of a parking lot to help some girl who appeared out of nowhere. Do you understand how that looks?" Richard did not answer right away. Victoria went on, her voice growing harsher. "This is how it always begins. A sad story. A tearful face. A hand held out after the event is over. Tomorrow there will be 10 more. Next week, reporters will be asking whether Richard Whitmore gives money to anyone who knows how to make him feel guilty." Annie stopped near the bus shelter. Her shoulders went stiff. She did not turn around, but every word reached her, clear enough to hurt. Richard's voice lowered. "She only asked for a pair of shoes. She asked because she knew you would soften," Victoria replied. "And you did. Right in front of everyone." A billionaire bending in the snow because a stranger knew exactly what to say. Samuel shut the rear door of the SUV harder than necessary. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, polite but firm. "That young woman was barefoot." Victoria turned sharply toward him. "I did not ask for your opinion, Samuel." "No, ma'am, but you saw it too." The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds, but Annie felt it. She wished the bus would come right then. She wished she could disappear into its warmth, sit in the back row, hide the shoes beneath the seat, and stop hearing wealthy people argue over whether her pain was real. Richard walked toward the shelter. Annie quickly wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Sir, please don't. You've already helped me. I need to know you can get home safely." "I can. The bus comes at 9:15. She looked down the dark road. "Usually." Richard glanced at his watch. "That is almost 30 minutes from now. I wait here most nights after work." "In this cold?" She gave a small shrug, as if the cold were not worth mentioning. You get used to waiting. No, he said quietly. People only say that when they have no other choice. Annie looked down at the shoes. If you want, I really will return them. I can clean them first. I told you, they are yours. They don't feel like mine. What do they feel like? She hesitated. Trouble. Richard understood what she meant. A young girl had just been given a pair of shoes, but instead of feeling relieved, she felt the cost of having someone see her need. Victoria came closer. Young lady. Annie nodded. Yes, ma'am. Then listen carefully. My husband is generous, sometimes far too generous. But do not mistake that for an invitation to come to our home, call our office, or bring your relatives to ask for more money. Richard turned back. Victoria, stop. I am protecting you. No, you are humiliating her. Victoria narrowed her eyes. Humiliating her? Richard, I am the only person here saying what everyone else is thinking. One of the older volunteers, the man in the red scarf, muttered, Not everyone. Victoria heard him. Her face reddened. Annie spoke before Richard could. Her voice was small, but steady enough. Mrs. Whitmore, I won't come to your house. I don't even know where your house is. I won't call your office, because I don't have the number. I didn't come here to ask for anything more. I only came because I thought there might still be one pair of shoes left on the table. Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it again. Annie continued. This time, the hurt showed clearly. No matter how hard she tried to hide it behind her words. I was late because I had to work. Not because I overslept. Not because I was being lazy. I tried to get here before the giveaway ended. But my manager said, if I left my shift, I shouldn't come back tomorrow. So I stayed. Then I ran, but I still didn't make it in time. Richard looked back toward the empty tables. Where do you live? He asked. Annie immediately tensed. Bridgeport. That is a long way from here. I know. Who is waiting for you at home? She looked at him, her expression guarded again. My mother. Is she sick? Annie's fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. My mother's legs are badly swollen. Some days, her ankles look painful just to see. But she still goes to work. Because rent doesn't care whether you're hurting. The older volunteer in the red scarf lowered his head. Richard asked more gently. What does your mother do? She takes care of elderly people, mostly in nursing homes. She helps them sit up, bathe, eat, and use the bathroom. The things people don't like to talk about unless they need someone to help them. And the shoes? Richard asked. Where are your shoes? Annie swallowed. They were old. The soles were held together with tape. If the sidewalk was wet, water got in. But my mother has to leave for work before the sun comes up. Her bus stop is farther than mine. She can't walk that far without shoes. So you gave them to her. She doesn't know, Annie's voice caught. I left before she woke up from her nap. I put them beside her uniform. She'll be angry when she finds out. If Annie's sacrifice touched your heart, please like this video. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from. And let us know who you would give your only pair of shoes to. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories about kindness, family, and hope. Richard closed his eyes for a moment. You hope to get another pair tonight and replace them. If I could, men's shoes would have been fine. Torn boots would have been fine. I could have stuffed paper inside them. I've done that before. Victoria turned her face away, but her jaw remained tight. Far down the road, the bus lights appeared through the falling snow. Slow, faint, but real. Annie felt both relieved and afraid. Richard took another bill from his wallet. Then take a taxi home. She immediately shook her head. No, sir. Annie, no, please. Her pride rose in front of her like a thin, fragile wall. You already gave me shoes. You already helped me enough. If I take all the money you're offering, she'll be right about me. You do not need to prove anything to her. I know. Annie looked at the bus coming closer. But I need to prove something to myself. The bus hissed to a stop at the curb. The doors opened. A wave of warmth carrying the smell of old rubber mats and stale coffee spilled out. Annie stepped toward it, then stopped and turned back. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore, she said. Not just for the shoes. For asking. Richard nodded, but he could not answer. She climbed onto the bus, the oversized shoes making every step heavy. The driver waited patiently while she found her fare card. Annie moved to a seat near the back, sat down, and tucked the money deep inside her canvas bag, beneath the apron and the bottle of pain relievers. As the bus pulled away, Richard stayed in the cold, watching until its two red taillights disappeared into the snow. Victoria pulled her coat tighter around herself. You just made yourself look like a fool in front of everyone. Richard did not look at her. No, I think I finally saw what the real foolishness was. What is that supposed to mean? He turned his head toward the empty stage, the rolled-up banners, the strips of tape left on the edges of the tables, and the parking lot where kindness had just been packed away and driven off in trucks. It means we spent more money telling people we cared, he said, than making sure people like Annie did not have to leave barefoot. Victoria's face turned cold and hard. Careful, Richard. Guilt makes rich people stupid. Samuel opened the rear door of the SUV, but Richard still did not get in. He kept looking down the road where the bus had disappeared. Maybe, he said. Or maybe, for the first time in years, it makes them honest. The ride back to Greenwich felt longer than the ride to the community center had been. Richard sat in the back of the SUV with his coat still buttoned, his hands resting on his knees. Victoria sat beside him, facing the side window, her lips pressed into a thin line. Samuel drove without turning on the radio. The only sounds were the heater, the tires over wet pavement, and the occasional tick of ice against the windshield. For 10 minutes, no one spoke. Then Victoria said, "You embarrassed me tonight." Richard looked at her. "I embarrassed you?" "Yes, in public, in front of volunteers, in front of staff. You let some girl make you kneel in a parking lot like a man who had lost all sense. She didn't make me do anything. That is worse. You chose it." Richard turned his eyes back to the road ahead. The snow moved through the headlights in thin white streaks. Somewhere out there, Annie was on a city bus in shoes too large for her feet, carrying money she had not wanted and shame she had not earned. Victoria continued. "You think I am cruel because I said what needed to be said. But you do not see what people do to families like ours. They learn your habits. They learn your events. They wait until the end, when you are tired and sentimental, and then they bring a story." Samuel's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. Richard noticed. "Say it, Samuel." Victoria made a small sound. "Please don't invite the help into our marriage." Samuel kept his eyes on the road. "I wasn't planning to say anything, sir, but you have something to say." A pause followed. Samuel changed lanes, waited for a sedan to pass, then spoke in the same calm voice he used when reminding Richard about appointments. "Mrs. Whitmore may be right that people bring stories, but some stories are true." Victoria looked toward the front seat. "And you know that how?" "I know what cold feet look like." The SUV went quiet again. Richard looked at Samuel's reflection in the rearview mirror. The man had worked for him 12 years. Arriving early, leaving late, always dressed in a dark suit and polished shoes. Always steady. Richard knew Samuel had grown up in Baltimore, had served in the army, had lost his wife to cancer 6 years ago. He knew these facts the way wealthy men often knew the facts of people who served them, clearly enough to repeat, not deeply enough to understand. Samuel added, "People don't walk barefoot in December for a performance, ma'am. Not when no camera is left to catch it." Victoria's face hardened. "You saw a few tears and decided she was a saint." "No, ma'am. I saw a working woman too tired to argue." The words settled in the car. Richard turned toward the window. He remembered Annie rubbing her hands together, trying to keep them still. He remembered her saying she had stayed late at work because leaving meant losing tomorrow's shift. Not dramatic, not polished, just tired. At home. The Whitmore estate rose behind iron gates and tall hedges dressed in snow. The house was lit from within, warm at every window. A wreath hung on the front door, large enough to cover half the glass. 2 stone planters held winter greens arranged by a florist Victoria hired every December. The garage opened, and Samuel pulled in beside Victoria's white Range Rover and Richard's black sedan. No one moved right away. Victoria unbuckled first. "I'm going upstairs. I suggest you sleep before you decide to adopt every sad story in Connecticut." Richard stepped out without answering. Inside, the house smelled of cedar, polish, and the dinner their cook had prepared before leaving for the night. In the dining room, food remained on the long table from a donor reception held before the charity drive. Roasted chicken carved but barely touched. A bowl of mashed potatoes covered with foil, green beans with almonds, dinner rolls under a linen cloth, and half an apple pea. Richard stopped in the doorway. Victoria walked past him. "What now?" He looked at the table. "How much of this gets thrown away?" She frowned. "Richard, it is leftovers." "How much?" "I don't know. Ask the kitchen in the morning." He thought of Annie asking if there was really nothing left. He thought of her standing beside empty donation tables while this food sat in his dining room, waiting to be discarded because no one in the house needed it. Victoria saw his expression and sighed. Do not turn a chicken dinner into a moral crisis. It was already a moral crisis. I just didn't notice. She shook her head. You are impossible tonight. No, I was impossible before tonight. Victoria stared at him for a moment, then went upstairs, her heels fading down the hall. Richard stayed in the dining room. He removed his coat and set it over a chair. Then he walked to the table and lifted the cloth from the rolls. They were still soft. He broke one open, not because he was hungry, but because Annie had been. The bread tasted plain, ordinary, and somehow difficult to swallow. Samuel appeared in the doorway, holding his cap in both hands. Will you need anything else, sir? Richard looked at him. Do you know where she works? The laundromat name was on her tag. East Putnam Wash and Fold. I can find the address. And where she lives? That may take a little longer. I want to know tomorrow. Samuel nodded. Yes, sir. Richard hesitated. Not to frighten her, not to make her feel watched. I understand. Do you? Samuel met his eyes. I think she has had enough people looking at her for the wrong reasons. Richard accepted the correction with a slow nod. Then we do it carefully. Samuel turned to leave, but Richard stopped him. Samuel. Yes, sir? What you said in the car, about people bringing stories. Samuel waited. How do you know which ones are true? The older man gave a tired smile that did not reach much beyond his mouth. You listen to what they ask for. Richard frowned slightly. If someone is running a game, they usually ask for the biggest thing they think they can get. Miss Annie asked for the smallest thing she could bear to ask for. Samuel glanced toward the dining room table. That tells you something. Richard looked down at the roll in his hand. She asked for old shoes. Yes, sir. And I almost sent her away. Samuel did not soften the answer. Yes, sir. Richard closed his eyes for a moment. He was used to people protecting him from discomfort. Samuel had never been careless, but he had never been dishonest either. That was why Richard trusted him more than half the men who sat on his board. Find her tomorrow, Richard said, and have Mrs. Alvarez pack this food before it spoils. If there are shelters still open tonight, send it. I'll take care of it. After Samuel left, Richard went to his office. The room was lined with awards, framed magazine covers, photographs from charity galas, hospital openings, ribbon cuttings, and holiday drives from years past. In nearly every picture, he was smiling beside someone holding a donated item. A coat, a blanket, a box of groceries, a ceremonial check large enough for cameras to read. He turned on the desk lamp and opened his laptop. News coverage from the evening was already online. One local station had posted a short segment. Billionaire philanthropist Richard Whitmore hosts annual Warm Steps Christmas Drive. The video showed him on stage, speaking in a warm, practiced tone. It showed volunteers cheering. It showed a reporter saying the event had served hundreds in need. It did not show the empty tables after closing. It did not show Annie. Richard replayed the clip without sound. He watched himself smile and shake hands. He watched himself pass a bag to an elderly man and place a coat over a woman's arm. He watched the version of himself the public knew. Then he paused the video on his own face. For the first time, the man on the screen looked less generous than well lit. His phone buzzed. A message from Victoria appeared. Please do not turn tonight into something bigger than it was. Richard read it twice, then set the phone down. But it was already bigger. Not because Annie had asked for shoes. Not because Victoria had pushed her. Not even because people had seen. It was bigger because Richard had seen. He opened a blank note on his laptop and typed Annie Johnson. East Putnam Wash and Fold. Mother. Denise. Swollen feet. Bridgeport. Needs help but does not want pity. He stopped there, then added one more line. Find out what happened before she had to ask. Outside the office windows, snow gathered along the stone ledge. Inside the house, heat moved softly through the vents. Richard sat in a leather chair that cost more than most monthly rents and thought of a young woman on a bus, guarding a pair of oversized shoes as if they might be taken from her. Near midnight, Samuel called from the kitchen. Sir, Mrs. Alvarez had already gone home, so I packed the food myself. I'm taking it to the overnight shelter on Chapel Street. Richard stood. I'll come with you. Samuel paused. Sir? I said I'll come. It's late. That seems to be when people get left behind. Samuel did not argue. When Richard stepped back into the cold, the estate lights behind him made the snow look gentle. But he knew better now. Cold was not gentle. Hunger was not gentle. Shame was not gentle. And somewhere between Greenwich and Bridgeport, Annie Johnson had carried all three without asking the world for anything but old shoes. The shelter on Chapel Street was not listed on any invitation Richard had ever received. No donor wall stood near the entrance. No photographer waited outside. It was a low brick building tucked between a closed pawn shop and a small Baptist church, its windows fogged from the heat inside and the breath of people who had nowhere else to go. Samuel parked at the curb and reached for the containers in the back seat. Richard opened his door before Samuel could stop him. "I can carry something." Samuel handed him a paper bag filled with dinner rolls and wrapped slices of apple pie. "Careful, the bottom's warm." Inside, the air smelled of coffee, damp coats, and floor cleaner. A woman at the front desk looked up from a clipboard. She was in her late 60s, with silver hair pinned back and reading glasses hanging from a chain. "Samuel Reed," she said, her face softening. "You're late tonight." "Yes, ma'am," Samuel said. "Brought a friend." The woman looked at Richard, then at the food in his arms. Recognition moved across her face, but she did not make a fuss. "Well, Mr. Whitmore, if you brought food, you're welcome. If you brought a speech, we're full." Samuel almost smiled. Richard gave a small nod. "Just food." "Then the kitchen's through there." Her name tag read Martha. She led them past a room where men and women sat at folding tables with paper cups of coffee. Some were eating quietly. Some rested with their coats still on, as if ready to leave at any moment. An older man in a Navy veteran's cap lifted his eyes to Richard, then looked away. A woman with swollen hands wrapped both palms around her cup, taking warmth before taking a sip. Richard placed the bag on the kitchen counter. Samuel set down containers of chicken, potatoes, green beans, and pie. Martha opened one, checked it, and called to a volunteer. "Heat this up, and put the rolls out before folks start thinking we're hiding the good stuff." She turned back to Richard. "Thank you." The words were plain. No praise, no ceremony. Richard found he preferred it. "Do you see many people come in after events like mine?" he asked. Martha removed the foil from another container. "After holiday drives? All the time. After they're over? That's when most working poor can get there." She said it without accusation, which made it worse. Day shift, night shift, 2 buses, bad weather. Folks don't live by event schedules, they live by work schedules. Richard looked toward the tables. A young woman came to mind tonight, Annie Johnson. Martha's hands paused over the foil. "Black girl? 18 or so? Works at the laundromat? You know her?" "I know of her. Her mother, Denise, used to help here before her leg got bad. Quiet woman. Never wanted anything free if she could scrub a pot or fold towels in exchange." Samuel glanced at Richard. Richard felt the name settle heavier now that someone else had spoken it with respect. "Annie came after we closed." Martha looked him over, reading more than he wanted read. "And? She was barefoot." Martha closed the container slowly. "Lord, she said her mother had the shoes. That sounds like Annie." Martha leaned one hip against the counter. That girl would give away the last match in a snowstorm and apologize for the smoke. Richard had no answer. Martha softened a little. "People like Annie don't ask because asking is easy. They ask when the wall is right at their back." "Do you know where she lives?" Martha studied him. "Why?" "I want to help. That can mean a lot of things from a man like you." Richard accepted that. "I want to apologize first. Then I want to ask what they need." "Ask," Martha repeated. "That's better than arriving with a plan." Samuel spoke then. "We'll be careful." Martha looked at him and nodded, trusting Samuel more quickly than Richard. "I can't hand out addresses, but I can tell you Denise was staying at the Maple Court Apartments last I heard. Building C. If they're still there, you'll find them. If you go, don't bring cameras, don't bring a crowd, and don't walk in like a man inspecting damage after a storm." "I won't." Martha held his eyes. "Mr. Whitmore, old folks in this place know your name. Some bless you, some curse you, most don't know what to do with you. If you want to be useful when nobody's clapping." Richard thought of Annie under the parking lot light. "I'm beginning to understand that." "No," Martha said, not unkindly. "You're beginning to notice it. Understanding takes longer." They stayed until the food was served. Richard did not give a speech. He stood near the kitchen door and watched people receive what had nearly been thrown away. A man thanked Samuel by name. A woman asked whether there was any pie left for her friend who could not stand in line. Martha wrapped a piece and told her to take 2. On the drive home, Richard did not sit in the back. He sat beside Samuel. Maple Court Apartments, he said. I'll confirm in the morning. No, we go in the morning. Samuel kept his eyes on the road. Yes, sir. When Richard finally returned home, the house was quiet. Victoria's door was closed. He went to his office and searched Harborview Senior Care, Denise Johnson, Maple Court, Bridgeport. Nothing useful came up at first, only corporate pages, old donation photos, a public annual report, and a list of facilities under companies he had invested in but rarely visited. Then one name caught his attention, Harborview Senior Care. He knew it. Not well enough. Which was the problem. His investment group owned a major stake in the parent company. He remembered touring one of its renovated facilities years earlier, smiling beside a row of nurses in blue scrubs. He remembered approving expansion plans. He remembered a quarterly report praising labor efficiency. Labor efficiency. The phrase now sounded like a locked door. He wrote the name in his notes under Denise Johnson. The next morning came gray and cold. Richard was dressed before 7. Downstairs, Victoria sat at the breakfast table with black coffee and her tablet. She looked up as he entered. You're going somewhere. Yes. If this is about that girl again, don't. It is about Annie. Victoria set the tablet down. Richard, I am asking you as your wife to stop before this becomes humiliating. It already became humiliating when you pushed her. Her face tightened. I barely touched her. She fell. She slipped. Because you pushed her. Victoria rose from her chair. Do you hear yourself? You are taking the side of a stranger over your wife. I'm taking the side of what happened. That girl has already done damage to this house. No, Richard said. She exposed damage that was already here. For a moment, Victoria looked less angry than startled. Then the anger returned. You are a billionaire. People will always want something from you. Richard put on his coat. Maybe. But last night, someone wanted the smallest thing we had promised to give away. He left before she could answer. Samuel was waiting by the SUV with 2 cardboard boxes in the back. Groceries, socks, basic medicine, and a pair of women's winter boots, bought from a store that opened early. Richard noticed the boots. Good, he said. Samuel nodded. Different sizes. We don't know hers. They drove toward Bridgeport as morning traffic thickened. Greenwich gave way to busier roads, smaller houses, gas stations, strip malls, and apartment buildings with old siding and crowded parking lots. Richard had been through towns like this often, but usually on his way somewhere else. From the back seat, with calls to make and emails to read, neighborhoods blurred into scenery. Now he watched people scraping windshields, workers carrying lunch bags, an older woman waiting at a bus stop with plastic grocery bags looped over both wrists. Life was already hard at work before the wealthy had finished breakfast. Maple Court Apartments sat behind a cracked sign half covered in snow. Building C stood at the back, brick walls stained by weather, outdoor stairs patched with salt, a broken security light hanging above the entrance. A shopping cart lay on its side near the dumpster. Richard stepped out, holding one box. Samuel carried the other. A man smoking near the stairwell watched them approach. You lost? Samuel answered before Richard could. Looking for Denise Johnson. We're here to bring something from Annie's friend. The man eyed Richard's coat, then the SUV. Rich friends now. Huh? Richard felt the sting of it, deserved or not. Samuel simply waited. The man pointed upward. 3rd floor. 3. C. Don't block the stairs. Miss Johnson got enough trouble. Richard climbed behind Samuel. The stairwell smelled of cold concrete, cooking oil, and old cigarette smoke. On the 2nd landing, a woman passed them, carrying a laundry basket. She glanced at Richard, then at the boxes, then moved aside without speaking. At 3C, Samuel knocked. Footsteps shuffled inside. The door opened a few inches. Chain still latched. Denise Johnson looked through the gap. She was thinner than Richard expected, with tired eyes and a work uniform sweater buttoned over a faded shirt. Her hair was pulled back, and one hand gripped the doorframe for balance. Samuel removed his hat. Good morning, ma'am. My name is Samuel Reed. This is Mr. Richard Whitmore. We met Annie last night. Denise's face changed at once. Fear came first. What happened? She asked. Is Annie all right? She's all right, Richard said quickly. She was all right when she got on the bus. We came because I owe both of you an apology. Denise looked from him to the boxes. Annie didn't steal anything. The words hit Richard harder than accusation would have. I know, he said. She didn't. She's a good girl. If she asked you for something, she must have been desperate. I know that too. Denise closed her eyes for a second. The chain rattled as she unlatched it. Then you'd better come in before the neighbors decide my business for me. The apartment was small, but Denise Johnson had kept it clean in the way people did when they had little room for disorder. A faded rug covered part of the living room floor. 2 mugs sat upside down on a dish towel near the sink. A blanket was folded over the arm of the couch. Near the heater, which clicked more than it warmed, Richard saw a pair of shoes. They were worse than Annie had described. The soles were wrapped with black tape. One heel had collapsed inward. A split near the toe showed where water could get in. Beside them lay a pair of thick socks, darned at the heel with thread that did not match. Denise followed his eyes and moved as if to block the shoes from view. Those are mine. Richard set the box of groceries on the table. Annie said you needed them for work. Denise's face tightened. Annie talks too much when she's tired. She was trying to protect you. She's 18. She should be thinking about school, not whether her mother can stand through a shift. Samuel placed the second box beside the first. Ma'am, we brought some food and a few things for the cold. No cameras. No forms. Nothing you have to sign. Denise looked at New Reich, Reif, New Rec, Reich, Tours, New Rice, Right to, Rec, New My. Denise looked at the boxes. From rich men. They usually come Nod again, naughty eye. Richard nodded. That's fair. She looked at him then, studying his coat, his shoes, his careful posture. Annie didn't send you here, did she? No. Then why are you here? Because last night I told your daughter to come back next year. Denise's expression changed. She had the look of a woman who had heard many apologies that were only meant to end a conversation. Richard continued. I didn't know she was barefoot. I didn't ask why she was late. I didn't ask what she had already been through before she reached me. I should have. Denise lowered herself into a kitchen chair, one hand pressing briefly against her knee. She tried to hide the movement, but Richard saw the pain cross her face. Samuel noticed too. Would you like me to move that heater closer, ma'am? It won't help much, Denise said, but thank you. Richard pulled out the chair across from her but waited. May I sit? That small question seemed to matter. Denise gave a short nod. He sat. For a moment, the only sound was the heater clicking again. Denise folded her hands on the table. My daughter is not lazy. I need you to know that before anything else. I do know. No, Mr. Whitmore. You saw one night. I need you to understand the whole thing. Annie works after class, then works weekends when she can. She brings home groceries and says she already ate, even when I know she didn't. She hides bus money in the sugar jar because she thinks I won't look there. Denise's voice roughened, but she held it together. She should not have had to ask you for shoes. Richard looked down. No, she shouldn't have. Denise studied him again. And your wife? Richard did not rush to defend Victoria. My wife was wrong. She pushed my daughter. Yes. The answer was direct enough to disarm her for a second. Denise turned her face away and took a slow breath. Annie didn't tell me that. She may not want to worry you. She worries me by breathing quiet. Denise wiped one hand over her forehead. When a girl starts hiding pain to protect her mother, something has gone wrong with the world. Richard felt that sentence settle into the room. He opened one of the boxes and took out the boots Samuel had bought. We weren't sure about size. Denise looked at them, then looked away at once. Those cost too much. They cost less than the flower arrangements at last night's event. Her mouth tightened. That doesn't make me feel better. It wasn't meant to. It was meant to tell the truth. Samuel, standing near the door, gave Richard a brief look of approval. Denise did not reach for the boots. If I take those, what happens next? Nothing you don't agree to. That sounds nice. It's true. People with money always say that before they start deciding what's best for you. Richard accepted the blow because it was not unfair. Then tell me what is best. Or tell me to leave. Denise looked at the shoes near the heater. Her shoulders dropped a little. What's best is my foot getting better, so I can work without Annie trying to save me from my own life. What happened to your foot? She gave a small, humorless laugh. Which version do you want? The one I told Annie so she could sleep? Or the one in the paperwork? The true one. Denise leaned forward and reached for a folder on the chair beside her. It was thin, bent at the corners, held together by a rubber band. She slid it across the table. I worked at Harborview Senior Care for almost 9 years. Mostly morning shifts, sometimes nights when they were short. One February, Mrs. Callahan slipped in the bathroom. She was 87, sweet woman, scared of falling. I caught her before she hit the tile, but all her weight came down on my leg. I felt something tear. Richard opened the folder. Inside were copies of medical forms, a workers' compensation notice, appointment summaries, and a letter printed on company stationery. Denise tapped the letter. They said it was pre-existing swelling. Said there wasn't enough evidence it happened during work. Said I should have reported it sooner, even though I reported it that same morning. Richard read the company name at the top, Harborview Senior Care. His chest tightened. He knew the logo. He knew the parent company. He knew the quarterly reports. How long ago? He asked. 8 months. And they denied your claim? They denied it. Then cut my hours because I couldn't lift like before. Then my rent fell behind. Then Annie picked up more work. Denise's voice stayed level, which made it worse. That is how a woman ends up wearing shoes held together by tape while her daughter walks across town with nothing on her feet. Richard read the letter again. The language was tidy and empty. Insufficient documentation, prior condition, liability, not established. He had seen phrases like that in reports. He had approved budgets built around phrases like that. Mr. Whitmore, Denise said, why does that name mean something to you? Samuel shifted near the door. Richard closed the folder carefully. Because my investment group holds a major stake in Harborview. Denise went still. The apartment seemed colder. So, she said slowly, my daughter asked for shoes from the man making money off the place that took mine away. Richard did not defend himself. He could not. I didn't know, he said. Denise's eyes hardened. That must be peaceful. The words struck with precision. Richard looked at the folder under his hand. You're right. I don't need you to feel bad at my table. No. You need the claim reopened, your medical bills reviewed, and the people who denied this to explain themselves. Denise gave a tired smile. People like me don't get explanations. We get envelopes. This time you'll get both. She did not trust him. He could see that. Trust would have been too easy. And Denise Johnson had not lived an easy life. The front door opened before anyone could speak again. Annie stepped in wearing Richard's oversized shoes. Her work coat still buttoned. Her face pale from the cold. She stopped when she saw them around the table. The boxes. The folder in Richard's hand. Her eyes moved to her mother. Mama, she said, fear rising in her voice. What did I do? Denise stood too quickly and winced. Nothing, baby. Annie looked at Richard. Did I get her in trouble? Richard rose from the chair. No, Annie. You may have gotten her out of it. Annie did not understand. She looked from him to the Harborview letter, then down at the shoes on her feet. Shame returned to her face, fast and familiar. I can give them back, she said, if that's why you came. Denise crossed the room and took her daughter's hands. No, nobody is taking your shoes. Richard looked at the folder, then at Annie. Your mother was hurt at work, he said. And the company responsible may have failed her. Annie's eyes filled, but she did not let the tears fall. We already tried. They said no. I know. People like them always say no. Richard held her gaze. Then I need to find out who taught them they could. Richard left Maple Court with Denise's folder on his lap and a silence in the SUV that felt different from the night before. It was no longer the silence of shock. It was the silence of a man counting the distance between what he had believed about himself and what his name had paid for. Samuel drove toward Greenwich, one hand steady on the wheel. You want to go home first, sir? No, the office. It's early. Then they'll have fewer excuses prepared. Samuel nodded and changed lanes. Richard opened the folder again. Denise Johnson's papers were worn from being handled too many times. A doctor's note. A physical therapy referral. She never completed. A denial letter. A second denial. A notice about reduced hours. Each page was clean in language and dirty in consequence. By 8:30, Richard was in the conference room on the 32nd floor of Whitmore Holdings. The room faced Long Island Sound. Though nobody at the table seemed interested in the view, 3 lawyers had been called in, 2 senior executives joined by video. 1 risk officer sat with a tablet, blinking too much. Richard placed Denise's folder in the center of the table. "Harborview Senior Care," he said. "Denise Johnson. I want the claim reopened today." The general counsel, Paul Madsen, adjusted his glasses. "Richard, we need to review the matter before making any commitment." "You're reviewing it now." Paul glanced at the others. "Workers' compensation decisions are handled through Harborview's claims administrator. Whitmore Holdings is not directly involved in individual cases." Richard leaned forward. "My money is directly involved. My board seat is directly involved. My signature is on the expansion documents that praised reduced labor costs. Don't explain distance to me, like it washes my hands." No one spoke for a moment. The risk officer, a woman named Karen Liu, cleared her throat. "I pulled the preliminary file while you were on your way. The denial appears to have followed procedure. Procedure failed her. Procedure protects the company from fraudulent claims." Richard tapped the folder. "Does Denise Johnson look fraudulent to you?" Karen did not answer. Paul spoke carefully. "We all sympathize with Miss Johnson, but one emotional case can create exposure. If we reopen this without cause, we invite every former employee with a complaint to demand reconsideration." Maybe they should. The sentence went through the room like a draft under a door. One executive on the screen, Mark Ellison, leaned closer to his camera. He ran operations for several Harborview facilities and had the practiced calm of a man who had survived many meetings by sounding reasonable. "Richard, I respect your concern, but we can't run a healthcare business on sentiment." "You run a caregiving business," Richard said. "Try saying that first." Mark paused. "Caregiving still has margins. And people." "Of course. Then why does this file call Denise a claimant 17 times and a caregiver not once?" Paul shifted in his chair. "Language in legal documents is standardized. So is neglect, apparently." The door opened before Paul could respond. Victoria entered without knocking. Dressed for the day in a dark suit, her phone in one hand. She looked at the folder, then at Richard. "I heard you called an emergency meeting." Richard's expression did not change. "I did. About the girl. About her mother." Victoria looked around the room, then gave a tight smile. "Everyone. Forgive my husband. He had a difficult evening, and seems determined to turn a parking lot incident into corporate policy." Richard stood. "This meeting isn't yours. It becomes mine when you risk our reputation before breakfast." Paul looked down at his notes. Karen stared at her tablet. The executives on the screen stayed very still. Victoria moved to the table and placed both hands on the back of a chair. "Richard, you are a billionaire. People will come at you through whatever door you leave open. Last night it was old shoes. Today it is a claim file. Tomorrow it will be a lawsuit, a protest, a camera crew in our driveway. Maybe the driveway could use cameras pointed at the right thing for once." Her eyes narrowed. "Do not get clever with me. I am trying to protect you." "No. You're trying to protect the version of me that looks good beside you." The room tightened. Victoria lowered her voice. "Careful." Richard turned back to the table. "Karen, I want every injury claim denied by Harborview in the last 5 years. Sorted by facility, job title, race if recorded, age, and reason for denial." Karen looked startled. "That is a significant request." "Then start significantly." Paul lifted a hand. "Richard, we need to consider privacy issues. Then consider them while complying legally. I want independent counsel involved by the end of the day." Mark spoke from the screen. "You're creating a problem where there may not be one." Richard picked up Denise's denial letter. "There is already a problem. The only question is whether it was profitable enough for us not to notice." Victoria laughed once, sharp and cold. "Listen to yourself. One barefoot girl and suddenly you're ready to accuse your own company of racism and abuse." Richard looked at her. "I didn't say racism. You didn't have to. That is where this is going, isn't it? A young black woman cries, and now everyone in this room must bow their heads and confess. Samuel, standing near the door, looked at the floor. Richard saw his jaw tighten. Richard's voice went quiet. "Leave Annie out of your mouth, unless you can say her name with respect." Victoria's face changed, not with shame, but with offense. "You are choosing strangers. I'm choosing facts." "You have facts?" He held up the folder. "I have a woman injured while caring for residents. I have a denial based on language that looks designed to exhaust her. I have a daughter working herself raw and walking without shoes because the system told her mother no. That's enough to begin." Paul spoke gently, as if addressing a client in distress. "Richard, beginning is one thing, public action is another. If this becomes visible, the press will ask why you intervened in this case and not others." "Good. I want to know why I didn't." Victoria pulled out her chair but did not sit. "You want advice? Issue a private donation. Pay the woman's medical bills quietly. Give the girl a scholarship if your conscience needs a trophy. But do not open company files because you feel guilty." Richard looked at her for a long moment. "Is that what you think charity is? A private payment to keep pain from becoming evidence?" Victoria's mouth tightened. "Charity is order. It is discretion. It is knowing how to help without setting fire to the house." "No," Richard said. "That's not charity. That's housekeeping." The words landed hard. Victoria stepped back from the chair. "You will regret this. Maybe, but not as much as I regret last night." She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Do not be surprised when this girl's story grows teeth. After she left, the room stayed silent. Richard sat again. "Where were we?" Paul exhaled slowly. "You were asking for 5 years of denied claims." "I was not asking." Karen nodded once, then began typing. Samuel's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and stepped toward Richard. "Sir." Richard looked up. Samuel held out the phone. A local gossip site had posted a short article. The headline read, "Teen approaches billionaire after charity event. Act of need or calculated setup." Below it was a blurry photo from the parking lot. Annie stood near Richard's SUV, wearing his shoes, her face wet, the bills visible in her hand. Whoever took the picture had cut out the fall, the bare feet, the empty tables, and Victoria's shove. Richard felt heat rise in his face. Paul leaned over, saw the headline, and muttered, "That was fast." Karen whispered, "Oh no." Mark's voice came through the screen. "This is exactly why we need a media strategy." Richard read the first lines. A young woman from Bridgeport reportedly approached billionaire philanthropist Richard Whitmore after his annual holiday giveaway had closed, prompting questions about security, cash exchanges, and the vulnerability of high-profile donors. His hand tightened around the phone. "She has a name," he said. Nobody answered. Richard looked at Samuel. "Find out who published this and who sent the photo." Samuel nodded. "Yes, sir," Paul said. "Richard, do not respond emotionally. We need to craft a statement." "Yes," Richard said, standing. "Here's the statement. Annie Johnson asked for old shoes after finishing work. She was barefoot in December. Anyone implying otherwise should be ashamed." Paul looked alarmed. "Please don't post that." Richard held the phone out to Samuel. "Not yet." The room exhaled. "But we are not hiding behind silence," Richard said. "Silence is how this happened." By noon, the article had spread. At East Putnam Wash and Fold, Annie saw it on a customer's phone before anyone showed it to her. She was folding white towels near the front counter when 2 women came in with a basket of clothes and kept looking over at her. One whispered, then turned her screen slightly. Annie saw her own face, the oversized shoes, Richard's hand holding money. The headline blurred for a second. Her manager, Mr. Bell, came from the back room with a stack of receipts. "Annie," he said, not unkindly but not softly either, "you need to tell me if this is going to bring trouble to my shop." "I didn't call anybody," she said. "I'm not saying you did. I'm saying people are already asking." A man waiting for dry cleaning gave a low laugh. "Must be nice. Cry to a billionaire and get paid." Annie kept folding the towel. She folded one corner to the other, smoothed it flat, stacked it on the pile. Her hands moved because stopping would mean feeling everything. "I was working last night," she said. The man shrugged. "So are the rest of us." Annie looked at him then. "Then I hope if you ever have to ask for help, nobody takes your worst minute and sells it as a headline." The shop went quiet. Mr. Bell looked away first. "Just finish the towels." Annie nodded and returned to work. She did not cry. Not there. Not where people could make that part of the story too. But in the small restroom behind the washers, she locked the door, sat on the closed toilet lid, and covered her mouth with both hands. The shoes Richard had given her rested heavy on the tile floor. They were warm. They were useful. They were also the reason strangers now thought they knew her. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mother. "Baby, are you okay?" Annie typed yes, erased it, typed "I'm fine," erased that too. Finally she wrote, "I'm working. Don't worry." Then she put the phone away, washed her face, and went back out before anyone could say she had been hiding. By the time Annie's shift ended, the article had reached people who had never heard her name before breakfast and felt entitled to an opinion by supper. She walked home from the bus stop in Richard's shoes, carrying a paper bag with eggs, a can of tomato soup, and the cheapest loaf of wheat bread at the corner store. The shoes were still too large. Each step made a soft scrape against the sidewalk. She had stuffed newspaper into the toes during her lunch break, but the paper had shifted, and now one heel kept lifting. A group of teenagers near the convenience store noticed. "Those your daddy's shoes?" one of them called. Annie kept walking. Another voice said, "No, man. Those are billionaire shoes." Laughter followed her to the corner. She did not turn. She had learned young that looking back gave people permission to think they had reached you. At Maple Court, the stairwell light on the second floor was out again. Annie climbed by memory, one hand on the railing, the grocery bag held close. Outside 3C, she paused, took a breath, and arranged her face before opening the door. Denise was at the kitchen table with her bad foot propped on a chair, a towel wrapped around her ankle. The boots Richard had brought sat unopened beside the wall. Annie saw them and stopped. "You didn't try them on?" Denise looked up from the bill in her hand. "I was waiting for you." "Mama, don't mama me. I'm not putting on shoes from a man whose wife pushed my daughter until I hear you say you're all right." Annie placed the groceries on the counter. "I'm all right." Denise gave her a long look. "Say it better." Annie pressed her lips together, then busied herself with the groceries. Eggs into the fridge, bread on the counter, soup near the stove. People saw the article. "I know. At work too." Denise's face tightened. "What did they say?" "Nothing worth repeating." "That means it hurt." Annie opened the cabinet too hard, and the handle knocked against the wall. "Everything hurts right now." Denise said nothing. She let the sentence sit between them. Annie turned, and the control she had held all day cracked. "I only asked for shoes. That's it. I didn't ask to be on a website. I didn't ask for people to look at me like I had a plan. I was late because I was folding sheets. I was cold because I gave you the only pair we had. And now strangers think they know what kind of woman I am." Denise reached across the table. "Come here." Annie shook her head. "If I come over there, I'll cry." "Then come cry." That broke her more than the insults had. Annie crossed the room and sat in the chair beside her mother. Denise pulled her close, and Annie bent forward, trying to make no sound. She failed. "I should have never gone," Annie said into her mother's shoulder. "Yes, you should have." "No, look what happened. You went because we needed help. I made us look poor." Denise took Annie's face in both hands, careful but firm. "We are poor. That is not the shame. The shame is people acting like poverty is proof of bad character." Annie wiped her cheek. "Mrs. Whitmore thinks I'm trying to take something." Mrs. Whitmore has probably never had to choose between medicine and bus fare. Her thoughts are expensive and useless. Despite herself, Annie let out a small breath that almost became a laugh. Denise nodded toward the boots. "Help me try those on." Annie knelt and opened the box. The boots were dark brown, plain, warm, with soft lining and thick soles. They were not fancy. They were the kind of boots made for standing at bus stops before dawn. Denise slid one foot in and winced. "Too tight?" Annie asked. "No, just been a long time since something fit right." Annie tied the laces gently. She did the second boot, then sat back on her heels. For the first time all day, something in her chest loosened. Denise stood carefully, holding the table. She took one step, then another. Not easy, but better. Annie covered her mouth. "Mama," Denise looked down at the boots, then at her daughter. "Don't you dare cry over shoes twice in one day. We have limits in this house." Annie laughed through the tears anyway. A knock came at the door. Both women went quiet. Annie rose. Are you expecting somebody? No. Another knock, louder this time. Denise motioned for Annie to stay back, then went to the door and looked through the peephole. Her shoulders dropped slightly. It's Mr. Reed. She opened the door with the chain on. Samuel stood in the hall, hat in hand. Evening, ma'am. Miss Annie. Annie's stomach tightened. Did Mr. Whitmore send you? He asked me to check that you both got home safe. I also brought something, if you'll allow it. Denise did not remove the chain. Something like what? Samuel lifted a small paper bag. No money, no cameras, just dinner from Martha at the Chapel Street shelter. She said Denise Johnson once washed every pot in her kitchen after Thanksgiving and still refused a ride home. Denise's expression changed. Martha said that? Yes, ma'am. She also said to stop being proud long enough to eat while the food is hot. Denise opened the door. Samuel stepped in only as far as the threshold. He handed Annie the bag. Inside were 2 containers of chicken stew, biscuits wrapped in foil, and 2 slices of pie. Annie stared at it. She remembered us? Martha remembers everybody who tries to sneak out before being thanked. Denise took the bag from Annie and set it on the counter. Tell her I said she talks too much. I will, ma'am. Samuel looked at Annie. Mr. Whitmore also wanted you to know he is looking into your mother's claim. Properly. Not as a favor. As a matter that should have been handled right. Annie folded her arms. And Mrs. Whitmore? Samuel's face remained calm. Mrs. Whitmore is not pleased. That makes 2 of us, Denise said. Samuel almost smiled. Mr. Whitmore said something else. He said you owe him nothing. Not gratitude. Not silence. Not forgiveness. Annie looked down at the oversized shoes. Then why does it feel like owing? Because people have made you pay for help before, Samuel said. That doesn't mean help is always a debt. Annie wanted to believe that. She was too tired to know if she could. After Samuel left, Denise warmed the stew on the stove. The apartment filled with the smell of pepper, chicken, and carrots. Annie set 2 bowls on the table. They ate slowly, quietly, both aware of how rare it was to have hot food arrive without a bill. Later, while Denise rested with her new boots beside the couch, Annie washed the bowls and folded the paper bag flat to use again. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared. Saw you online. Nice shoes. Annie's hands went cold. Another message came. How much did he give you? She turned the phone face down. Denise stirred. Annie? I'm okay, Annie said too quickly. But that night, when she lay on the couch under a thin blanket, the shoes beside the door looked different. They had kept her feet from the pavement, but they had also made her visible to people who wanted to punish her for needing them. For the first time, Annie wondered whether warmth could come with a warning. At 9 the next morning, Richard entered the Harborview conference room with Denise Johnson's folder under his arm and a copy of the online article printed in his hand. He had slept less than 3 hours. Victoria had not spoken to him at breakfast except to say that lawyers existed for a reason and husbands should learn to use them. The room was already full. Paul Madsen from legal sat nearest the screen. Karen Liu had 2 laptops open. Mark Ellison joined by video from Harborview's regional office, wearing the same careful expression he had used the day before. 2 other executives had been added overnight. A human resources director named Elaine Porter, and a claims supervisor named Frank Bellamy. A square-faced man who kept clearing his throat before anyone spoke to him. Richard placed the printed article on the table. Before we discuss claims, he said, Who sent this photo? No one answered. Richard looked around the room. A young woman was photographed in a private moment after one of our charity events. The picture was cropped to make her look like she was taking money from me in a parking lot. Someone gave that to a gossip site. Paul folded his hands. We don't know that anyone connected to us did it. Then find out who did. We can ask our communications team to monitor. Not monitor. Find out. Victoria entered then, as if she had been waiting for the right moment. She wore a dark dress and carried her phone like evidence. Richard, perhaps before we hunt ghosts, we should admit the obvious. You handed cash to a young woman in public. People saw it. That is not a conspiracy. Richard turned to her. She was pushed. She fell. She was barefoot. None of that made it into the story. Victoria's eyes sharpened. Because the world is not required to publish your preferred version. No, but I am required to tell the truth when a lie benefits me. Mark Ellison leaned toward his camera. Richard, The article is unfortunate, but our larger issue is your request for 5 years of denied injury claims. That kind of review could trigger regulatory questions. Good. Elaine Porter shifted in her chair. Good. If regulators have questions, maybe we should have had them first. Frank Bellamy finally spoke. With respect, Mr. Whitmore, injury claims get denied every day. That doesn't mean anyone did anything wrong. Richard opened Denise's folder. Walk me through this one. Frank glanced at Paul. Richard noticed. Don't look at him. I asked you. Frank pulled the file up on his tablet. Denise Johnson, caregiver. Harborview Fairfield facility. Reported lower leg injury after assisting resident in bathroom. Claim reviewed and denied due to insufficient incident documentation and prior swelling complaints. She reported it the same morning. There was no supervisor witness. The resident fell. The resident was assisted before impact. So Denise prevented a fall. Frank blinked. That appears to be the statement. And got hurt doing it. That was her claim. Richard sat forward. No. That was her injury. Victoria exhaled. Richard. He did not look at her. Was the resident interviewed? Frank scrolled. Mrs. Callahan had memory issues. Her statement was considered unreliable. Was Denise's doctor contacted? Medical records were reviewed. That is not what I asked. Frank's jaw worked. I don't know. Karen spoke quietly. There are notes here about staffing levels that morning. Richard turned to her. Read them. Karen hesitated. Facility was short 2 aides. Bathroom assistant schedule running behind. Supervisor noted delays due to unexpected absence. Richard looked at Mark on the screen. Short-staffed? Mark's expression held. Senior care facilities face staffing challenges nationwide, and our solution was to praise labor efficiency in quarterly reports. Nobody answered. Richard picked up another sheet Karen had printed. How many denied claims from Harborview in 5 years? Karen looked down. Preliminary number is 412. The room shifted. How many from direct care staff? Richard asked. 339. How many women? 286. How many workers of color? Karen was quiet too long. Richard's voice lowered. Say it. Based on available demographic records. 241. Victoria spoke sharply. That proves nothing. Those jobs are disproportionately held by women of color. The numbers would reflect the workforce. Samuel, standing near the door, said nothing, but Richard felt the weight of his presence. Richard looked at Karen. How many were later approved on appeal? 27. Out of more than 400. Yes. Paul stepped in. Again, we need context. Denials can be valid. Appeals require documentation. Many claimants don't follow through. Richard tapped Denise's file. Maybe because following through costs money they don't have. Elaine Porter said. Some employees stop responding. Or they go back to work hurt because rent comes due faster than justice. Victoria's patience snapped. There it is again. Justice. You are turning a business review into a sermon. Richard turned to her. No. I'm turning a sermon into a business review. I stood on a stage and preached care while companies tied to my name denied it. Mark's voice hardened for the first time. Be careful, Richard. Statements like that can damage all of us. Then consider yourselves warned. Frank pushed back from the table slightly. I followed policy. Who wrote it? Claims policy comes through the administrator, legal review, and corporate guidelines. Who approved corporate guidelines? Paul said. Ultimately, the board. Richard leaned back. There it was. Not one villain hiding in a room. Not one cruel signature. A chain of tidy approvals, each far enough from the injury to feel clean. Victoria softened her tone, but not her message. Richard, listen to me. Pay Denise Johnson. Quietly. Review a few files if you must, but do not open the gates. Once these people believe you can be pressured, they will line up around the block. These people, Richard repeated. Victoria froze. He looked at her for a long moment. You keep saying that. I mean claimants, complainants, people who work in the places that make us money. She looked away first. Karen's second laptop chimed. She read something, then paled. What? Richard asked. The article has been picked up by 2 larger sites. Comments are getting ugly. Samuel's phone buzzed too. He checked it and stepped closer. Sir, Annie received messages last night. Richard's face tightened. From who? Unknown numbers. She told her mother this morning. Mrs. Johnson called me because she didn't know whether to call police. Victoria rolled her eyes. Oh, for heaven's sake. Richard stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. Enough. The room went still. He pointed toward the printed article. This lie has put a working young woman in danger of public harassment. It has humiliated her mother. It has distracted from a claim this company should have handled 8 months ago. And all morning, I've heard more concern for exposure than for the person exposed. Paul rose slightly. Richard, no one wants Miss Johnson harmed. Then stop treating her like a risk category. He turned to Karen. I want an independent review firm hired today. Not tomorrow. Today. Every denied direct care injury claim from Harborview in 5 years. Karen nodded. Elaine, no retaliation against current employees who come forward. Put it in writing. Elaine swallowed. Yes. Frank, preserve every communication tied to Denise Johnson's claim. Frank looked toward Paul again. Richard's voice cut in. Every communication. Yes, Mr. Whitmore. Mark said, you're moving too fast. Richard looked at the screen. No, Mark. Denise Johnson has been waiting 8 months. I'm late. Victoria picked up her purse. You will burn down your own house to warm a stranger. Richard answered without raising his voice. If my house was heated by someone else's pain, maybe it needs to burn. She stared at him, then left the room. No one followed her. After the meeting, Richard remained by the window while the others gathered their notes in silence. Long Island Sound lay gray beyond the glass. He did not feel victorious. He felt older. Samuel came to his side. Mrs. Johnson asked if she should change Annie's number. Yes, Richard said, and get them legal help. Independent, not ours. I know someone. Good. Samuel hesitated. There's more. A few people from the article comments are talking about showing up at the laundromat. Richard turned. Annie's at work? Yes, sir. Then we go there. Samuel's eyes held his. She may not want you walking in. Attention is already the problem. Richard stopped. The instinct to act, to arrive, to fix, pressed against him. Samuel was right. Call Denise, Richard said. Ask what Annie wants. Not what we think she needs. Samuel nodded and stepped away. Richard looked back at Denise's folder on the table. The pages no longer seemed thin. They seemed crowded with everyone who had been reduced to a file, a number, a denial code. By late afternoon, Annie was in the laundromat, folding towels under the hum of dryers, trying not to look at the front window. Every time a car slowed outside, her stomach tightened. Mr. Bell had lowered the blinds halfway, though he claimed it was because of glare. Her phone buzzed. A message from Denise. Mr. Reed says Mr. Whitmore wants to help but won't come unless you say it's okay. Annie read it twice. Her first feeling was relief. The second was fear of needing relief. She typed, tell him not to come here. Then she added, please. A minute later, another message came, this time from Samuel. Understood. If you need a ride after work, I can wait 2 blocks away. No SUV. No fuss. Your choice. Annie held the phone close. Across the room, a customer muttered to another, that's her. Annie put the phone in her pocket and kept folding. For now, choosing not to be rescued was the only piece of control she had left. Annie finished her shift with the blinds half lowered and the dryers beating heat into the room until the windows sweated. Outside, the evening came early. Cars passed with headlights on. Every few minutes, someone slowed near the laundromat, and every time, Mr. Bell looked up from the register as if the glass might break from being watched. You can leave through the back, he said at 7:45. Annie kept folding the last stack of towels. My bus stop is out front. I know where the bus stop is. Mr. Bell rubbed one hand across his face. He was not an unkind man, only a tired one with rent, payroll, and machines that broke whenever business was good. I'm saying you don't need people bothering you. They'll think I'm hiding. Let them think. Annie placed the final towel on the shelf. If I hide, they'll say I'm guilty. If I walk out, they'll follow me. If I say nothing, they make up words. If I talk, they cut the words apart. There isn't a right way to be poor in public. Mr. Bell did not answer. He looked older than he had that morning. A woman near the folding table, Mrs. Alvarez from the bakery 2 doors down, zipped her coat, and stepped closer. Honey, my nephew can drive you. Annie shook her head. Thank you, ma'am. I already have a ride if I need one. Mrs. Alvarez glanced toward the front window. Then need one. Annie managed a small smile. I'll think about it. When she checked her phone, Samuel had sent another message. I'm parked on Maple Street in a gray sedan. No signs. No SUV. No rush. Annie stared at the words. He had done exactly what he promised. Close enough to help. Far enough not to claim her. Outside, 3 people stood across the street pretending not to wait. One held a phone at chest level. Another leaned against a car with his hood up, though no steam rose from the engine. The third was a woman in a knit hat who had come in earlier asking the price of wash and fold service, then left without dropping anything off. Annie put on her coat. Richard's shoes waited by the door where she had changed into them after work. Her feet were warmer now, but the sight of those shoes still made her stomach tighten. She wished she could wear them without the world turning them into a story. Mr. Bell unlocked the back door. Go through here. Alley leads to Maple. Annie looked toward the front, then back at him. You sure? No, but I'm old enough to know sure is overrated. Go. She slipped out into the alley with her canvas bag pressed under one arm. The cold came fast against her face. For a few seconds, all she heard was the hum of the laundromat wall, the drip from a gutter, and her own breath. She walked carefully around a patch of ice near the dumpster and headed toward Maple Street. Halfway down the alley, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Running out the back now? Annie stopped. Another message came. Nice try. Her throat tightened. She turned toward the street, and a car door shut somewhere behind her. Footsteps entered the alley. Annie, a man called, almost friendly. Just want to ask a couple questions. She began walking faster. The shoes scraped against the pavement. Too big, too loud. Come on, he said. You took the money in public. Why shy now? Annie reached the end of the alley and turned onto Maple. Samuel's gray sedan was parked half a block down with its lights off. He stepped out as soon as he saw her. Miss Annie, he called. She moved toward him, but the man from the alley came out behind her with his phone raised. Another person crossed from the corner. The woman in the knit hat appeared near the bus stop. Samuel walked to meet Annie, not running, not making a scene. Keep coming, he said. The man lifted his phone higher. Is this the driver? The billionaire sent a car now? Annie's face burned. Please stop. Just answer one question. How much did Whitmore give you? Samuel placed himself between them. That's enough. The man laughed. Who are you, her security? No. I'm the man asking you to step back. She's in the news. Public interest. Samuel's voice stayed even. Harassment is not public interest. Annie reached the car. Her hands shook so badly she struggled with the door handle. Samuel opened it for her, and she slid inside. The warmth hit her face, and for one painful second she wanted to cry from that alone. The man moved closer to the window, still filming. You hiding because you lied? Samuel shut the door and turned to him. You have her face. You have her answer. Now you're done. Or what? Samuel did not raise his voice. Or you will explain to the police why you followed a woman from her workplace after she asked you to stop. The woman in the knit hat muttered, She doesn't look scared when she's taking money. Annie heard it through the glass. She closed her eyes. Samuel got in and drove away without another word. He did not ask questions until they had gone 4 blocks and turned onto a quieter road. Do you want to go home? Annie looked at the dark stores sliding past.
Where would you like to go?
Yes. Then she thought of the people outside the laundromat, the unknown messages, the way trouble had followed her from work. She pictured someone waiting outside Maple Court, someone asking Denise questions, someone taking a picture of her mother's boots. No, she said, barely audible. Samuel slowed. Where would you like to go? I don't know. That's all right. Annie held her bag tighter. I don't want them near my mother. Samuel nodded once. Then we don't go straight there. Her phone rang. Denise. Annie answered quickly. Mama? Where are you? With Mr. Reed. Denise's breath caught, then steadied. Thank God. I'm okay. You don't sound okay. I'm not hurt. That is not what I asked. Annie looked out the window. Snow began again, thin and restless under the streetlights. Some people were outside work. Denise was quiet too long. Come home. I want to. But what if they follow? Samuel said softly. May I? Annie put the phone on speaker. Miss Johnson, Samuel said. This is Samuel. I have Annie with me. She's safe. We can bring her home by a different route, or we can stop somewhere public and quiet until we're sure no one is following. Denise's voice trembled despite her effort. I don't like my daughter being driven around scared. No, ma'am, neither do I. Annie covered her mouth. Denise said, bring her to the Chapel Street shelter. Martha will still be there. I'll meet you. Samuel glanced at Annie. She nodded. They drove in silence for several minutes. Annie's phone kept lighting up, but she turned it face down. At a red light, Samuel said, You did nothing wrong. Annie gave a tired laugh without humor. Everybody keeps saying that like it changes what happens. It may not change tonight. Then what good is it? It keeps the blame where it belongs. She looked at him. Does that help? Overtime. I'm 18, Mr. Reed. I don't have a lot of overtime. Samuel absorbed that. When they arrived at Chapel Street, Martha was waiting at the side entrance in a cardigan and boots, arms folded against the cold. She opened Annie's door before Samuel could. Come on in, sweetheart, Martha said. And before you tell me you're fine, know that I have been lied to by better liars than you. Annie stepped out. The oversized shoes hit the salted sidewalk. Martha saw them, saw Annie's face, and said nothing about either one. That kindness nearly undid her. Inside, the shelter was quieter than it had been the night before. A few people drank coffee at the tables. Someone had left a pot of soup warming in the kitchen. Martha led Annie to a small office near the back. Denise arrived 20 minutes later, breathing hard from the walk between the bus stop and the entrance. She was wearing the new boots. Annie saw them and broke. I'm sorry, she said as Denise pulled her close. For what? For making everything worse. Denise held her tighter. You did not make the world cruel. You only asked it to stop stepping on us. Samuel stood by the door, giving them privacy without leaving them alone. Martha placed 2 cups of tea on the desk. Now listen to me. Tonight, you rest. Tomorrow, Mr. Whitmore can decide whether he is a man with a guilty heart or a backbone. He's trying, Annie said. Martha looked at her. Trying is good, standing firm is better. At that moment, Samuel's phone rang. Richard, Samuel answered. Sir, Richard's voice came through low and tense. Is Annie safe? Yes, with her mother at Chapel Street. Good. A pause. Tell them I won't come, unless they ask me to. But tell them I'm not stepping away. Samuel looked at Annie and Denise. They can hear you, sir. Richard's voice changed, softer now. Annie, I'm sorry this followed you. Annie wiped her face. I don't want to be famous, Mr. Whitmore. I know. I don't want people calling me a liar. I know that too. Then make them stop. The room went still. Richard did not answer quickly. When he did, his voice carried the weight of a decision. I can't make every cruel person decent, but I can make sure the truth is louder than the lie. Annie closed her eyes. Denise reached for her hand. Martha nodded once, as if that was the first useful thing a rich man had said all week. Outside, another car slowed near the shelter, then passed. Samuel moved to the window and watched it disappear down the block. The danger had not ended. It had only changed streets. But for the first time since the article appeared, Annie was not standing alone under the weight of it. Richard did not go to Chapel Street that night. He wanted to, and that was exactly why he stayed away. Annie had asked for the truth to be louder than the lie, not for another rich man to arrive with headlights, security, and the kind of attention that made frightened people smaller. So he sat in his office at home with the door closed, his phone on the desk, Denise Johnson's folder open beside a legal pad filled with names, dates, and questions. Victoria came in just after 10 without knocking. You're still doing this, she said. Richard did not look up. Yes, I spoke with Paul. He says you're demanding an independent review. I am, and you have Samuel playing bodyguard for that girl now? He made sure Annie got somewhere safe. Victoria gave a short laugh. Listen to yourself. Annie, Denise, Martha, Samuel, you sound like you're running a rescue mission out of our house. Richard capped his pen and set it down. No, I'm cleaning up a mess connected to my name. Our name, she said. Do you remember that? Or did your conscience erase your family too? He leaned back in his chair. My family should not need a lie to stay comfortable. Victoria's face tightened. She crossed the room, picked up the gossip article from his desk and shook it once. This is what happens when you act without discipline. A girl approaches you after an event. You give her shoes and cash. Now she's being harassed. You're angry, and the company is exposed, all because you could not say no. I did say no, Richard said quietly. That was the first wrong thing I did. Victoria stared at him as if he had become someone she did not recognize. You want truth? She said. Fine. Here is truth. The world is full of sad stories. You cannot let every one of them climb into your car. Annie didn't climb into my car. She fell in my parking lot after you pushed her. Victoria's mouth opened, then closed. I told you. She slipped. She fell because your hand was on her. You're making me sound like a criminal. I'm describing what happened. She stepped closer to the desk. Be careful, Richard. You are not the only one with lawyers. The sentence was quiet, but the threat was not. Richard looked at her for a long moment. Is that where we are now? That depends on whether you remember who stood beside you for 22 years. You stood beside me when the cameras were on. Her face flushed. How dare you? How many times have we stood on stages and told people we cared? How many checks have we handed out while staff packed leftovers we never thought to send anywhere? How many women like Denise worked in facilities we owned while we celebrated margins? Victoria's voice dropped. Do not put this on me. I'm putting it on us. No, she said. You are putting it on me because I said the ugly thing out loud. Richard stood, not in anger, but because sitting felt like surrender. You didn't just say something ugly. You believed it before Annie ever opened her mouth. Victoria went very still. For a moment, the house seemed to hold its breath. Then her phone buzzed. She looked down, read the screen, and her expression changed. Not guilt. Calculation. What is it? Richard asked. Nothing. Victoria. She slipped the phone into her pocket. A reporter wants a comment. From you? Yes. Why? Because your behavior has become news. Richard's voice hardened. Do not speak about Annie. I will speak about my husband. You will not imply she used me. Victoria smiled without warmth. You don't get to control every version of the story. Before Richard could answer, his own phone rang. Paul Madsen. He answered. Paul. Paul's voice was tight. Richard, we have a problem. Only one? I just received notice from Harborview's outside claims administrator. Someone from their office says documents are being requested too broadly. They're pushing back. They can push in writing. There's more. Mark Ellison wants an emergency board call tomorrow morning. He says your actions are creating instability. Richard glanced at Victoria. She looked away. Did Victoria speak to him? Paul hesitated. I can't say. That means yes. Victoria's eyes flashed. Do not drag me into your paranoia. Richard kept the phone to his ear. Schedule the call. Richard, before that happens, I strongly recommend we prepare a controlled statement. No statement until I speak to Annie and Denise. Paul sighed. They are not communications professionals. No, they're the people being talked about. After the call ended, Victoria picked up her purse from the chair. You are making the oldest mistake wealthy men make, she said. Which one is that? You think guilt makes you noble? Richard looked at Denise's folder. Maybe guilt is only useful if it makes you responsible. Victoria walked to the door. When this turns on you, don't expect me to stand in the wreckage. Richard answered softly. I'm beginning to think. She left, closing the door with a controlled click. Richard stood alone in the office for a while. Then he called Samuel. How are they? Annie's calmer, Samuel said. Denise is trying not to show how scared she is. Martha has them in the back office with tea. Any media outside? Not media. One car slowed twice. I got the plate. Good. Mrs. Johnson wants to go home tonight. She doesn't want neighbors worrying. Is it safe? Safe is a big word. But I can take them a back way. Martha offered to have a volunteer stay near the entrance at Maple Court. Richard rubbed his brow. Ask them what they prefer. I did. Denise said she wants her own bed, and Annie said she wants whatever makes her mother stop pretending her leg doesn't hurt. Despite everything, Richard almost smiled. That sounds like Annie. Yes, sir. A pause followed. Then Samuel said, Sir, there's something else. What? Martha knows two women who used to work at Harborview. Both had denied claims. One still has paperwork. They're willing to talk, but not to company lawyers. Independent counsel only. Yes, sir. That's what I told them. Set it up. Already working on it. Richard looked at the legal pad. His list had grown from 1 name to 4. It would grow again by morning. Samuel, he said, tomorrow's board call is going to be ugly. Most rooms get ugly when someone opens the curtains. Richard leaned against the desk. Did you always know how much of this was wrong? Samuel did not answer quickly. I knew enough to recognize it when I saw it. And you never told me. You never asked the right questions, sir. That was not cruel. It was worse. It was fair. Richard ended the call and returned to his notes. He wrote 3 lines at the top of a clean page. Reopened Denise Johnson claim. Independent review of denied Harborview claims. Public correction of Annie story. He paused, then added a 4th. Victoria source? He did not want to write it. He did not want to think it. But the timing was too clean. The article too angled. The reporter's request too quick. Victoria had warned him the story could grow teeth, and now it had bitten exactly where she wanted. At Maple Court, Samuel walked Annie and Denise up the back stairs just before midnight. The hallway was quiet except for a television playing behind one door and a baby crying somewhere below. Denise moved slowly in her new boots, trying to hide each wince. Annie held her elbow. I can walk, Denise said. I know, Annie answered, not letting go. Inside the apartment, Samuel checked the window locks and made sure the hallway was clear before leaving. Annie thanked him at the door. You don't have to thank me every time I do the decent thing, he said. I don't know the rules anymore. He looked at her kindly. Then here's one. When people help without asking for your dignity in return, you can simply say, good night. Annie nodded. Good night, Mr. Reed. Good night, Miss Annie. After he left, Denise sat on the couch and unlaced her boots. That man was raised right. Annie leaned against the kitchen counter. Mr. Whitmore? Mr. Reed. Annie smiled for the first time in hours. Denise looked at her daughter's face, and the smile faded. Give me your phone. Annie hesitated. Annie. She handed it over. Denise read the unknown messages. Her jaw tightened, but she did not let fear take over her voice. Tomorrow we change your number. I need it for work. We'll tell Mr. Bell. I don't want more people helping. Denise set the phone on the table. Baby, there is a difference between being helped and being handled. We are going to learn the difference. Annie sat beside her. What if this gets worse? It might. That's supposed to make me feel better? No. It's supposed to make me not lie to you. Denise took her hand. But worse is not the same as wrong. You did not do wrong. Annie looked toward the door where Richard's shoes sat beside Denise's new boots. 2 pairs that had brought warmth and trouble into their home. I wish I had never asked, she said. Denise squeezed her hand. I don't. I wish the world had answered kinder. The next morning, the emergency board call began at 7. Richard joined from his office, wearing the same suit he had worn the day before. On the screen, Mark Ellison appeared with 3 board members. Paul, Karen, and 2 investors whose faces Richard knew from years of golf outings and charity dinners. Victoria was not on the call. That worried him more than if she had been. Mark began before Richard had finished his coffee. We need to address the reputational issue. Richard said, we need to address the injury claims. They are connected now because you connected them. No, they were connected when a Harborview caregiver lost wages after an injury, and her daughter ended up asking for shoes at my event. One board member, Charles Brenner, cleared his throat. Richard, with respect, we all admire compassion. But opening a 5-year review based on one anecdote may suggest wrongdoing where none has been established. Then the review will establish what exists. And if it creates litigation, then maybe litigation is the bill for what we underpaid. Mark's expression hardened. That is not how fiduciary duty works. Richard leaned toward the camera. Do not lecture me about duty while direct. Care workers are treated as disposable expenses. Paul cut in quickly. Let's keep language measured. Richard looked at him. Measured language is how Denise Johnson became a denied claimant instead of an injured caregiver. Karen spoke from another square on the screen. I have early numbers. They are not final, but patterns exist. Mark interrupted. Karen, preliminary data should not be discussed broadly. Richard said, continue. Karen hesitated, then did. Denials are higher in facilities with chronic understaffing. Many rejected claims involve lifting injuries, falls, and repetitive strain. A significant number of employees did not appeal after denial. Charles frowned. That could mean the claims lacked merit. Or, Richard said, they lacked money, time, transportation, or faith that anyone would listen. Mark leaned back. You're turning this into class warfare. No, Richard said. Class warfare is when a woman breaks her body caring for elders, and we call her pain an administrative burden. The call went silent. Then Paul's assistant knocked on Richard's office door and stepped in, pale. She handed him a tablet. The new headline was already live. Victoria Whitmore speaks. My husband has a good heart, but good hearts can be manipulated. Below it was a polished photo of Victoria in their home library. Richard read the first paragraph. Victoria expressed concern that wealthy philanthropists were increasingly targeted by individuals who approached them outside official channels. She did not name Annie directly, but she did not have to. Richard set the tablet down. Mark said, "This complicates things." Richard looked at the faces on the screen. No. It clarifies them. He ended the call before anyone could stop him. Then he stood, picked up his phone, and called Samuel. Find Annie and Denise, he said. Ask if they'll meet me at Chapel Street. Today? Today. Should I tell them why? Richard looked at Victoria's headline again. Yes, he said. Tell them my wife just made the lie louder. Now I need their permission to answer it with the truth. Samuel called Annie first, not Denise. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice low beneath the noise of washing machines. Mr. Reed? Yes, Miss Annie. Are you somewhere you can talk? I'm at work. I'll be brief. Mr. Whitmore saw the interview his wife gave this morning. Annie closed her eyes. She had not watched it, but 3 customers had. One of them had held the phone, where she could see Victoria's face, and asked if she felt bad for causing trouble in a marriage. Annie had gone on folding shirts because her hands knew what to do when her heart did not. What did she say? Annie asked. Samuel paused. Enough. That bad? Bad enough that Mr. Whitmore wants to respond. But he won't do it without speaking to you and your mother first. Annie leaned against the counter behind the dryers. Why us? Because it is your name they are walking around without permission. She looked toward the front window. A car slowed, then moved on. Mr. Bell had started keeping a broom near the register, though everyone knew a broom could not stop a camera. Where? She asked. Chapel Street. Martha can give us the back office. No press. No staff from his company. Just Mr. Whitmore. Me, you, your mother, and Martha, if you want her there. Annie rubbed her thumb over a crack in her phone case. I get off at 6. I can pick you up 2 blocks away again. No SUV? No SUV. No one following? I'll do my best. That isn't a promise. It's an honest answer. Annie appreciated that more than comfort. Okay. When she told Mr. Bell she needed to leave at 6 sharp, he looked toward the window and lowered his voice. This about the article? Yes. You coming back tomorrow? If I still have a job. He frowned. You have a job. I'm just trying to keep trouble from walking in with you. Trouble already knows the address. He looked tired. Annie, I'm not your enemy. I know, but I can't keep apologizing for being inconvenient. Mr. Bell looked at her for a moment, then nodded toward the dryers. Finish that load and go at 6. I'll clock you out at 6:30. She wanted to thank him, but her throat tightened. That's not necessary. Neither is half the world's meanness. We live with it anyway. At 5:58, Annie changed into Richard's shoes and left through the back. Samuel waited in the gray sedan, engine running, cap low on his brow. No one stood in the alley this time. That did not make her less nervous. It only made the quiet feel staged. Denise was already at Chapel Street when they arrived, seated in Martha's office with her new boots planted firmly on the floor. Martha stood by the coffee maker, pouring from a pot that looked older than everyone in the room. Richard arrived 10 minutes later through the side entrance. No overcoat with a fur collar, no camera crew, no lawyers. He wore a dark suit and carried a folder. He stopped just inside the office, as if waiting to be allowed farther. Denise spoke first. You can sit, Mr. Whitmore. We don't have much room for men to hover. Martha handed him coffee in a chipped mug. And don't ask if it's fresh. It's hot. That's the standard here. Richard took the mug. Thank you. Annie sat beside her mother, hands folded around her phone. She had turned it off on the ride. For 20 minutes, no new messages could reach her, and that small silence felt like shelter. Richard looked at both of them. Victoria gave an interview this morning. She suggested I was manipulated. Denise's mouth hardened. By my daughter. She didn't say Annie's name. She didn't have to. No, Richard said. She didn't. Annie looked down at her hands. People at work watched it. Richard's face tightened. I'm sorry. I'm tired of being apologized to after someone else gets to speak first. That stopped him. Martha leaned against the desk. Good. Say that again if he forgets. Richard nodded slowly. You're right. That's why I'm here. I want to correct the record publicly. I want to say what happened. That you came after work. That you asked for shoes, not money. That you were barefoot. That Denise's claim was denied by a company tied to mine. And I've ordered an independent review. Denise watched him closely. And what happens to Annie when you say all that? More cameras? More people saying she cried her way into a settlement? I don't know, Richard admitted. That's the part I can't pretend to control. Annie looked up. Then why do it? Because silence is already being used against you. She wanted to argue, but he was not wrong. Richard opened the folder and placed a sheet on the desk. This is a draft statement. Nothing goes out unless you both agree. Denise did not reach for it. Read it. Richard read slowly. He stated that Annie Johnson had approached him after the Warm Steps event ended, that she had just left work, that the event had failed to serve people whose work schedules kept them from arriving on time. He said she asked for old shoes. He said he had personally seen she had none. He said any suggestion that she was running a scheme was false and cruel. Then he moved to Harborview, Denise's injury, and the independent review. When he finished, the office was quiet except for the heater. Annie said, "Take out the part about my feet." Richard looked at the paper. It explains why I helped. I don't want people picturing them. Denise touched her daughter's wrist. Annie kept going. They already took my face and made it theirs. I don't want them having that too. Richard nodded and crossed out the sentence. Done. Martha watched him over her mug. That was quicker than most men with money. Richard almost smiled, but the room was too serious for it. Denise leaned forward. And my claim? I don't want you using me for a better headline either. You have my word. With respect, Mr. Whitmore, your word has a large house and a lawyer. Mine has rent due. Richard accepted the point. Then you'll have your own lawyer. Independent. Paid through a community legal fund. Not my company. Samuel has someone ready if you want to speak with her. Denise looked at Samuel. He said, her name is Ruth Coleman, retired legal aid attorney. She scares people politely. Martha nodded. I know Ruth. She scares people correctly. For the first time, Denise's shoulders eased. Annie turned her phone back on to check the time. It lit up with 9 messages. Her face changed before she could hide it. Denise saw. More? Annie nodded. Samuel stepped closer. May I? She handed him the phone. He read without expression, then gave it back face down. We changed the number tonight. I need it for work, Annie said. I spoke with Mr. Bell, Samuel replied. He'll update your contact through your mother for now. He also said anyone bothering you at work will be asked to leave. Annie frowned. You called my boss? I asked your mother first. Denise lifted a hand. I said yes. Annie was too tired to be angry. Everybody's making plans around me. Richard's expression softened. Then choose the next one. She looked at him. He said, do we release the statement? The question sat in the room. Annie thought of Victoria's clean voice on strangers' phones. She thought of the man outside the laundromat, the woman at the bus stop, the messages asking how much she had been paid. She thought of her mother's boots, still new, still stiff, still necessary. If you say it, Annie said, don't make me sound helpless. Richard nodded. And don't make yourself sound like a hero. I won't. And don't call it charity. He looked at her carefully. What should I call it? Annie's voice was quiet. Late. Martha set her mug down. That'll preach. Richard folded the statement and put it back in the folder. Then I'll say it was late. Denise reached for Annie's hand under the desk. All right. Richard stood. I'll release it tonight. Martha pointed at him. From here? No, from my office. Good. This place has enough trouble without your board members fainting in the hallway. Samuel walked Richard to the side entrance. Before leaving, Richard turned back to Annie. I can't undo what happened. I know, but I can stop pretending I don't know who it happened to. Annie held his gaze, worn down but no longer shrinking. Then say my name right. I will. He left through the side door with Samuel. Annie sat back, exhausted. Denise squeezed her hand. You did good. I didn't do anything. You told a powerful man where the line was. That is not nothing. Outside, Richard stepped into the cold and opened the folder again before getting into the car. On the draft, beneath the crossed-out sentence, he wrote one word in the margin. Late. Then he underlined it twice. Richard released the statement from his office at 7:42 that evening. Paul Madsen had begged for one more hour. The communications team wanted softer language. Mark Ellison wanted the Harborview paragraph removed. Victoria sent one text that read, "If you publish this, do not expect me to clean up the damage." Richard read it, then posted the statement anyway. It began with Annie's name, not a young woman, not an individual, not a person connected to an incident. Annie Johnson. He wrote that Annie had come to the Warm Steps Christmas drive after finishing work, that she arrived after the event had closed, and that she had asked for old shoes because she had none available to wear. He wrote that giving her help had not been an act of being manipulated, but an overdue act of basic decency. He wrote that public suggestions about her character were unfair and false. Then he wrote the line Annie had given him. What happened that night was not charity. It was late. He named Harborview Senior Care. He named Denise Johnson as a former caregiver whose injury claim would be reopened with independent legal review. He announced a full review of denied injury claims from direct care staff over the last 5 years. He ended by saying no employee should have to lose wages, health, or dignity because paperwork moved faster than mercy. Before posting, he hesitated over the final sentence. Then he deleted the polished version his communications team had suggested and wrote his own. I am not asking the public to praise me for noticing too late. I am asking those connected to my companies to prepare for the truth. He hit publish. For the first 10 minutes, nothing happened except the small numbers beneath the post rising faster than usual. Then local reporters picked it up. Then a state newspaper. Then a national business account reposted it with the words, "Billionaire turns charity controversy into labor review." Paul called twice. Richard did not answer. Samuel came into the office with coffee and placed it on the desk. It's moving fast. I know. Mrs. Johnson called Martha. She and Annie read it together. Richard looked up. What did they say? Denise said you listened better than she expected. Annie said you spelled her name right. Richard let out a breath he had not known he was holding. That's something. That is something. His office door opened hard. Victoria stood there with her phone in her hand and fury held so tightly it made her voice quiet. You used my interview against me. Richard leaned back. No. I answered it. You made me look cruel. You did that without my help. Her face changed. Do you know what people are saying? They are calling me racist. They are calling me heartless. They are digging through photos, boards, foundations, everything we have ever touched. Richard looked at her for a long moment. Annie got called a liar before breakfast. You survived one evening of being questioned. Victoria stepped inside and shut the door. Do not compare me to her. Why not? Because I am your wife, and she is the person you hurt. Victoria's hand tightened around her phone. I did not hurt her. I protected us. You pushed her. She fell. She was barefoot. Victoria looked away for half a second. It was the closest she had come to admitting memory. Richard stood. I need to ask you something, and I need the truth. Did you send that photo to the gossip site? No. The answer came too quickly. Richard waited. Victoria's eyes hardened. I did not take the photo. That is not what I asked. She looked toward the window, then back at him. One of the event coordinators sent it to me. I forwarded it to someone who could help control the story before it became worse. Richard's face went still. You fed them Annie's image. I protected your image. She was crying. She was holding your cash in a parking lot. Optics matter. Her life matters. Victoria laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because she had run out of softer weapons. This is what she has done to you. 2 days ago you understood the world. Now you talk like a man trying to buy a soul at retail. Richard stared at the woman he had shared a house with for more than 20 years. He saw the charity dinners, the winter galas, the donor boards, the polite smiles over polished plates. He saw Annie falling on frozen pavement while Victoria's hand left her shoulder. He saw 2 worlds touching for 1 second, and one of them calling the other stubborn. You need to leave the room, he said. Victoria went quiet. Excuse me? I can't speak to you right now without saying something I won't regret but should not say. She stared at him. This marriage will not survive you humiliating me. Richard's voice was tired. Maybe it should not survive what you did. For a moment neither moved. Then Victoria opened the door and walked out. An hour later, Richard was still at his desk when Paul finally reached him through the office line. Richard, the board is demanding a special session tomorrow. Mark is furious. Harborview's administrator is threatening to suspend cooperation unless the request is narrowed. Let them threaten in writing. There may be legal exposure for your statement. There was moral exposure before it. Paul sighed. That sentence will not help in court. It helps me sleep. Will it? Because this is about to get uglier. Richard looked at the snow gathering beyond the glass. It already was ugly. We just stopped decorating it. At Chapel Street, Annie sat with Denise in Martha's office, reading the statement on Martha's old desktop computer because Annie's phone had been turned off. Denise leaned close to the screen, one hand on the desk, lips moving slightly as she read every word. When she reached the sentence about the injury claim, she stopped. He put it there, Denise said. Annie nodded. Yes, he didn't hide it behind some foundation language. No. Martha stood behind them with a cup of tea. That man either grew a spine or borrowed one. Denise gave her a look. Martha, what? I'm old, not gentle. Annie kept reading. Her name at the top made her uneasy. The whole world did not need her name. But it was written cleanly. Not as bait. Not as a rumor. As if she were a person who had the right to be called what her mother named her. A knock came at the office door. Samuel stepped in. Statements out, Martha said. World still spinning? So far, Samuel said. But there are reporters outside Mr. Whitmore's office, and 2 near Harborview. Denise stiffened. Not here? No, ma'am. Not yet. We are keeping this place out of it. Annie folded her arms. They'll find it. They may, Samuel said. Which is why Ruth Coleman is coming. The lawyer? Denise asked. Yes, she can help you decide what to say, what not to say, and who has no right to ask. Annie looked at her mother. I don't want to talk to cameras. Then you won't, Denise said. Samuel nodded. Mr. Whitmore said the same. Martha pulled a chair out with her foot. Good. Sit before all of you turn justice into standing around. Samuel sat. For a few minutes, the room held a strange kind of calm. The statement was out. The lie had been answered. Nobody was safe yet. But the air had changed. Then Martha's front desk phone rang. She stepped out to answer it. Through the half-open door, Annie heard her say, Chapel Street Shelter. Martha speaking. Then silence. Then her voice sharpened. Who gave you this number? Annie's stomach tightened. Samuel stood. Martha came back in slowly, her face set. Reporter. Asked if the barefoot girl was hiding here. Denise reached for Annie's hand. Samuel took out his phone. I'll handle it. Annie looked toward the small window facing the alley. The glass reflected the room back at her. Her mother, Samuel, Martha, the old computer, the statement on the screen. For the first time, she understood that truth did not end trouble. Sometimes truth only told trouble where to come next. Denise squeezed her hand. Look at me. Annie did. We are not hiding, Denise said. We are resting until we choose our next step. Annie looked down at Richard's oversized shoes under the chair. Then she looked at her mother's new boots. Our next step, she repeated. Martha nodded. That's right. And this time, nobody else gets to decide where your feet go. Ruth Coleman arrived at Chapel Street the next morning in a navy coat, low-heeled boots, and the steady expression of a woman who had spent 40 years listening to powerful people explain why nothing could be done. She carried one leather bag and no patience for drama. Martha opened the door for her and said, You're late. Ruth checked her watch. I'm early by court standards. This isn't court. Then everybody may survive. Annie sat beside Denise in the back office, hands folded between her knees. She had slept on Martha's couch for 2 hours and woken to the sound of reporters outside the front entrance. They were not shouting. That made it worse. Quiet waiting felt like a trap. Ruth introduced herself without fuss. Denise Johnson? Yes, ma'am. Annie? Yes, ma'am. I'm Ruth Coleman. I used to run legal aid in New Haven. I am retired, which means I now take cases that annoy me personally. This one qualifies. Denise almost smiled. Mr. Reed said you scare people politely. I do my best. Ruth sat and opened her bag. Before anyone asks, I do not work for Richard Whitmore, Whitmore Holdings, Harborview, or anyone who wants your silence. Mr. Whitmore offered to fund independent counsel through a community legal account. I told him I would send the bill to that account and ignore him afterward. Annie looked up. Can you do that? I've been ignoring rich men since before you were born. Martha muttered. Amen. Ruth placed a yellow legal pad on the desk. Now, the first rule is simple. You do not speak to reporters unless you choose to. You do not answer unknown calls. You do not sign anything. You do not let anyone turn your pain into a performance. Is that clear? Denise nodded. Annie did too. The second rule, Ruth continued, is that truth needs paperwork. Denise, I need every document you have from Harborview, every doctor visit, every reduced shift notice, every text from a supervisor, every bill. Annie, I need anything connected to the harassment after the article. Screenshots, messages, names if you know them. Annie swallowed. I deleted some. That's all right. We start with what remains. Shame makes people delete things. Fear makes people throw things away. The law knows humans are human, even when it pretends not to. Denise reached for the folder Samuel had brought from Maple Court. This is most of it. Ruth took it and began reading. Her face did not change, but her pen moved often. After several minutes, she tapped one page. They denied based on prior swelling. Yes, Denise said. Did they provide medical proof? No. Did they send you to an independent doctor? No. Did anyone interview Mrs. Callahan? They said her memory wasn't reliable. Ruth made a sound deep in her throat. Convenient. Annie leaned forward. Can they fix it? They can reopen it. They can pay medical bills. They can compensate lost wages. They can change procedures if pressure is high enough. But fixing it? Ruth looked at her over the top of her glasses. Fixing is a bigger word than paying. Before Annie could answer, Samuel stepped into the doorway. Mr. Whitmore is outside. Denise stiffened. Outside, where? Side entrance. Alone. He said he'll leave if you don't want him here. Ruth closed the folder. Do you want him here? Annie looked at her mother. Denise said, let him in. If his name is on this mess, his face can sit in the room with it. Samuel brought Richard in a minute later. He looked tired. More tired than Annie had seen him. His tie was loosened, and he carried no folder this time. He stopped near the door. Good morning, he said. Ruth looked him over. Mr. Whitmore, Miss Coleman, do not interrupt my clients. Do not make promises you have not cleared through people who understand law. Do not use the word unfortunate. I hate that word. Richard blinked once, then nodded. Understood. Martha poured him coffee. It's still not fresh. Hot is enough, Richard said. Ruth pointed to the only empty chair. Sit. He sat. Denise folded her hands. Your wife sent reporters here. Richard's jaw tightened. I don't know that she sent them here. I know someone leaked enough for them to find it. That sounds like a rich man's way of saying maybe. It is, Ruth said, but at least it's an honest maybe. Annie looked at Richard. They called me the barefoot girl. I'm sorry. She shook her head. Don't say sorry unless you can make them stop calling me that. Richard leaned forward. I can't control every headline, but I can hold a press conference and put the full matter on record. Your name, your work, what you asked for, what happened to your mother, and what Harborview did. I won't ask you to speak. I won't ask you to stand beside me. I won't show your feet. I won't use your pain as a picture. Ruth watched him. And what are you asking for? Permission, Denise asked. To say what? To say I was late. To say my company was late. To say Annie was treated as suspicious because she was poor and black. And asking after closing, when no one was watching. To say Victoria's interview was wrong. The room went quiet at his wife's name. Martha crossed her arms. That last part will cost you. Richard looked at her. It should. Samuel stood near the door, silent. But Annie saw something in his face shift. Ruth tapped her pen. If you do this, Harborview's board will fight. Your wife may fight. Reporters will dig. Some people will call Denise a liar, and Annie worse. The public likes a clean story. This is not clean. Annie let out a tired breath. It's already dirty. Richard turned to her. That is why I don't want to decide for you. Denise looked at Annie, then at the boots on her own feet. Baby, I am not scared of people knowing I got hurt. I'm scared of them making you carry it. I've been carrying it anyway, Annie said. Denise's eyes filled, but she did not look away. Annie rubbed her palms together, a habit from cold nights and long waits. If he tells it, they'll still talk. Ruth nodded. Yes. If he doesn't, they'll talk and lie. Yes. Annie looked at Richard. Then say it. But say I was working. Say I came late because I was working. Not wandering. Not looking for trouble. I will. And say my mother helped people for years. I will. And say your wife pushed me. Richard looked down for a moment, then back at her. I will. Denise drew in a breath. Ruth's pen stopped moving. That statement has legal implications, Richard said. So did her hand. Nobody spoke. Outside the office, the front desk phone rang again. Martha ignored it. Richard stood. I'll hold the press conference at the community center where it happened. Not here. Not near your home. Today at 4, Ruth lifted a finger. I'll review your remarks before you speak. Good. And no questions about Annie unless I approve them. Agreed. And if any reporter asks where she is, the answer is? Richard said. She is where she chooses to be. Martha nodded. Look at him learning. Annie almost smiled, but fear pressed it down. Mr. Whitmore? Yes? When you stand there, they'll listen because you're rich. I know. That doesn't make you right. No, he said, but maybe it can make room for what is. At 4 that afternoon, Richard Whitmore stood outside the Greenwich Community Center without stage lights. No banner hung behind him. No volunteers in matching scarves lined the curb. The trucks were gone. The tables were gone. Only the cold pavement remained. Reporters gathered with microphones and cameras. Paul stood off to one side, looking as if he had aged during the car ride. Samuel stood near the entrance. Ruth stood beside him, arms folded, ready to stop the first person who crossed a line. Richard stepped to the microphone. 2 nights ago, he began. Annie Johnson came here after finishing work. She arrived late because work kept her late. She asked me for old shoes. Not money. Not attention. Old shoes. The cameras clicked. My wife suggested Annie was performing. My wife then pushed her. Annie fell. When she stood, I saw she had no shoes on. A murmur ran through the reporters. Richard continued. Annie was not the one who should have been ashamed that night. I was. My event was over, but her need was not. That is the difference between charity as a schedule and care as a duty. He looked down at the paper Ruth had approved, then set it aside. Her mother, Denise Johnson, worked as a caregiver at Harborview Senior Care, a company connected to my holdings. She was injured helping a resident. Her claim was denied. That denial is now under independent review, along with hundreds of others. Questions began at once, voices crossing. Richard raised a hand. I will answer questions about my companies. I will answer questions about my conduct. I will not answer questions meant to shame Annie Johnson or Denise Johnson. They are not public property. A reporter called out, Are you accusing your own wife of racism? Richard paused. I am saying a young black woman asked for help and was treated first as a suspect. If that makes people uncomfortable, they should examine the discomfort before they defend it. The murmuring stopped. At Chapel Street, Annie watched the press conference on Martha's desktop beside her mother. When Richard said her name, she gripped Denise's hand. When he said she was not public property, she began to cry quietly. Denise did not tell her to stop. On the screen, Richard stood in the same place where she had fallen. This time, the cameras were on. This time, the truth was not being packed into a truck and driven away. By the next morning, Richard's press conference had been clipped, replayed, argued over, praised, mocked, and pulled apart by people who had never stood in the cold where Annie had fallen. Some called him brave. Some called him reckless. Some said he had thrown his wife to the wolves. Others said Victoria had only said what too many people had been thinking. Annie did not read most of it. Ruth Coleman took her phone for the morning and said, You can have your life back in pieces. Today we start with breakfast. Martha made eggs in the shelter kitchen, the kind that stuck to the pan if you looked away too long. Denise sat at a small table near the back, her new boots under her chair, her foot resting on a folded towel. Annie ate because her mother watched every bite. You need protein, Denise said. Annie gave her a tired look. You sound like the nurses you used to boss around. I did not boss. I directed. Martha snorted from the stove. She bossed. For a few minutes, they sounded almost normal. Then Ruth came in with a folder and ruined the piece in the useful way she had. Harborview's administrator has agreed to reopen Denise's claim. They're also preserving files for the broader review. Denise stopped with her fork halfway to her mouth. Agreed? Because they want to? Or because they're scared? Ruth sat. At this stage, I don't care which door Truth uses as long as it enters the room. Annie looked at her mother. Does that mean they'll pay for your treatment? It means we begin, Ruth said. Medical evaluation first. Independent doctor, not someone on their list. Lost wages will be calculated. We'll also review whether the denial followed the law or just hid behind it. Denise put her fork down. Her hand trembled once, before she folded both hands in her lap. I don't know how to feel. Martha placed a fresh mug of coffee in front of her. Start with suspicious, then move to cautiously relieved if they behave. Annie reached under the table and touched her mother's wrist. Denise turned her hand and held on. Across town, Richard sat in a boardroom that felt colder than the December street. Mark Ellison had come in person this time. So had Charles Brenner and two investors who rarely attended anything without lunch served on china. Paul Madsen sat beside Richard, a stack of documents in front of him, and the look of a man trying to keep a bridge from burning while people argued over who bought the matches. Mark opened with, "You've created exposure beyond what any of us anticipated." Richard answered, "No, I exposed what was already there." Charles leaned forward. "Richard, the market doesn't reward public confession. It shouldn't reward quiet abuse either." Mark's mouth tightened. "That word is inflammatory. So is denying a caregiver's claim after she gets hurt doing the job your brochure calls sacred." Paul cleared his throat. "Let's keep this productive." Karen Liu entered with a binder and placed copies in front of each person. The preliminary review shows denial clusters at 3 facilities, including Harborview Fairfield. Staffing shortages appear repeatedly in incident records. Mark looked at her. "Preliminary?" "Yes," Karen said. "And troubling." Richard glanced at her. Yesterday she had been cautious. Today she sounded like someone who had read enough to lose the comfort of uncertainty. Charles flipped through the pages. "This could cost millions." Richard looked around the table. "Good. Then it will be priced closer to what it cost them. Shareholders won't like that. Some of our shareholders are retired teachers, nurses, firefighters, pension funds. Maybe stop assuming everyone with money wants it washed clean of responsibility." Mark pushed his chair back. "You are not fit to lead this review." Richard gave a short nod. "I agree." That stopped the room. Paul looked at him. "Richard, I'll step back from operational control of the Harborview review. It should be independent, with Ruth Coleman allowed to represent Denise Johnson without interference, and a separate firm reviewing all denied claims. I'll fund the community legal account personally, not through Harborview, so no one can call it company influence." Charles narrowed his eyes. "And your role?" "My role is to make sure no one buries this." Mark said. "You're inviting lawsuits." Richard looked at him. "I'm inviting people to stop being forced into silence because lawsuits are expensive." By afternoon, the company announced the independent review. It was dry, full of careful phrasing. But it existed. That alone changed something. Former Harborview workers began calling Ruth's office. Some had old letters. Some had photos of bruises, braces, swollen hands. Some only had memories and anger they had carried too long. Ruth called Martha and said, "I need more coffee and a second legal pad." Martha said, "You need a church basement." By evening, Chapel Street's small meeting room had become a quiet intake center. No cameras were allowed. Samuel stood near the entrance. Not as a guard exactly, but as a man who knew when a doorway needed dignity. Workers came in hesitantly, women in scrubs, an older man with a cane, a housekeeper with wrist braces, a former aide who kept apologizing for crying. Annie helped pour coffee. She did not give legal advice. She did not tell her story unless asked gently. Mostly she listened. A woman named Mrs. Rivera sat with both hands wrapped around a paper cup. "I thought it was just me," she said. Denise, seated beside her, replied, "That is how they keep us quiet. They make each of us think we are the only one." Annie heard that and looked across the room. There were so many of them. People who had lifted, washed, fed, turned, comforted, and carried others for wages that barely held their lives together. People who had been told no by letters printed in clean language. Later, Richard arrived at Chapel Street, but he stayed near the hallway until Martha waved him in. "Don't stand there like bad news," she said. He entered quietly. Conversation softened but did not stop. That mattered to him. Maybe he was no longer the center of the room. Denise saw him and said, "They called." "Harborview?" "The doctor's office. Ruth set it up. Tuesday morning." Richard nodded. "Good." Annie stood beside the coffee table, holding a sleeve of cups. "People came because you spoke. They came because they were hurt. They came today because they thought someone might finally listen." Richard accepted the correction. "Then we need to keep listening." A silence passed between them, less heavy than before. Annie looked down at his shoes, then at hers. She still wore the pair he had given her, though Ruth had promised to help her get proper winter shoes that fit. "I used to think help meant somebody taking over," she said. "It often does. Don't do that." "I'm trying not to." "Trying is good," Martha called from across the room. "Learning is better." Richard looked over. "Do you hear every conversation in this building?" "Yes." Denise smiled for the first time that day. The smile did not last long, but it was real. That night, Victoria moved out of the Whitmore estate. Richard learned it from the housekeeper, who said Mrs. Whitmore had taken 2 suitcases and the small portrait from the upstairs hall. Victoria left no note, only a message through her attorney requesting privacy and advising him not to contact her directly while reputational issues remain active. Richard stood in the hall where the portrait had hung. The empty rectangle on the wall was paler than the paint around it. He felt grief, but not surprise. Some losses did not arrive in one blow. They accumulated in small silences until one day a wall showed what had been missing for years. Samuel found him there. "I'm sorry, sir." Richard shook his head. "Don't be. This didn't begin with Annie." "No, sir. It began long before I was willing to name it." Samuel stood beside him, both men facing the empty space. After a while, Richard said, "Do you think this is justice?" Samuel took his time. "No. I think it's the bill coming due." Richard nodded slowly. The next weeks did not heal everything. Denise still had pain. Annie still looked over her shoulder when she left work. Some commentators still mocked them. Harborview lawyers still argued over numbers, but checks began to be issued. Claims were reopened. Managers were suspended. A state labor office requested records. Ruth's retired phone rang like it had come back to work against its will. Richard kept his promise not to put Annie in front of cameras. When reporters asked where she was, he gave the same answer each time. She is where she chooses to be. One afternoon, Annie and Denise visited the community center with Ruth to review plans for a new winter assistance program. The old event schedule had been replaced with a full week of late hours, transportation vouchers, medical referrals, legal intake, hot meals, and shoe fittings by size. No one would be told to come back next year because a work shift ran late. Annie stood in the empty hall where the tables would be set up again. She remembered falling there. She remembered snow against her knee, Victoria's voice, strangers murmuring pity. She remembered Richard's shoes placed before her. Richard walked in with Samuel and stopped a few feet away. "We're calling it Warm Steps Fund." Annie considered that. "Not the Richard Whitmore Fund?" "No." "Good." He almost smiled. "I thought you might say that." She looked around the room. "Make sure people can come after work." "They can. And no one has to tell their whole sad story just to get shoes." "They won't. And if the shoes don't fit, they get another pair, not newspaper in the toes." Richard's face softened. "Yes." Annie nodded. "Then maybe it's a start." Richard looked at the floor where she had once stood barefoot. "A late one." "Yes," she said, "but late is better than never. If you don't ask people to clap because you finally showed up." Samuel coughed into his hand. Ruth smiled without hiding it. Richard took the lesson without protest. No clapping. Outside, snow began again, thin against the windows. Inside, the hall was still empty, but this time it did not feel finished. It felt prepared. 1 year later, snow fell on Greenwich before sunrise, quiet enough that the town looked softer than it was. By 6 in the morning, the community center lights were already on. No stage crew arrived. No trucks carried banners with Richard Whitmore's face. No photographers waited behind ropes. Instead, volunteers moved through the main hall setting out folding chairs, coffee urns, soup warmers, boxes of socks, racks of coats. and long rows of winter shoes, arranged by size. A handwritten sign near the entrance read, Warm Steps Fund. Open all week. Late hours available. For working families. Annie Johnson stood beside the shoe table with a clipboard in her hand and a pencil tucked behind her ear. She was 19 now, though the year had made her older in some ways and younger in others. Older because she had learned how quickly a stranger could turn pain into entertainment. Younger because, for the first time in years, she had begun to sleep without counting bills in her head. She wore her own shoes now. Plain black winter shoes, the right size, bought with money from her job, and a small scholarship that helped cover the nursing assistant classes she had started in the fall. She still worked at the laundromat 3 evenings a week, but not every night. Denise had insisted. You are not going to spend your whole life paying for mine, her mother had said. Annie had answered. Then stop making yours so expensive. Denise had laughed so hard she had to sit down. Now Denise sat near the medical intake table in a pair of orthopedic boots that fit well, her cane resting against her chair. Her leg was not perfect. Some mornings still began with swelling, some nights still ended with pain, but she had received treatment, lost wages, and a letter of apology from Harborview that Ruth Coleman said was too careful but legally useful. Denise kept the letter in a drawer under the silverware, not because she liked reading it, but because she liked knowing it existed. Martha stood by the coffee station, ruling over volunteers as if they had enlisted in her private army. Don't stack the cups upside down near the edge, she told a young man from a local college. People come in cold. Cold hands knock things over. Think before gravity does. Yes, ma'am, he said quickly. And stop calling everyone buddy. Some of these folks are older than your grandfather. Yes, ma'am. Annie heard and smiled. At 7, the doors opened. The first people came slowly. A home health aide still in scrubs. A man who drove a delivery van at night. 2 older women from a senior apartment building. A cook from a diner whose shift ended at dawn. Nobody had to prove enough pain to enter. At the registration table, volunteers asked names, sizes, immediate needs, and whether anyone wanted to speak privately with a legal or medical advocate. The questions were short. The tone mattered. A woman in her 60s approached Annie's table, carrying her old shoes in a plastic grocery bag. The soles were worn smooth. What size, ma'am? Annie asked. 8.5 if you've got it, 9 if you don't. We'll get you 8.5. The woman glanced at the rows of boxes. You sure? I can make 9 work. I know you can, Annie said gently. But today you don't have to. The woman looked away for a second, then nodded. Across the hall, Richard Whitmore entered through the side door with Samuel beside him. Richard wore a simple dark overcoat. No press followed. That had been Ruth's rule, Martha's demand, and Annie's condition. If any reporter came, they stayed outside and received a written statement about the fund's services, not faces. Richard paused near the entrance, watching people move through the hall. There was no applause. No one stopped the room to thank him. A few volunteers nodded. Martha pointed him toward a stack of boxes that needed moving. You're late, she said. Richard checked his watch. It's 7 to 10. We opened at 7. Samuel took off his gloves. Where do you want us? Martha pointed. Coats first, then canned goods. And if either of you tries to lift with your back, I'm calling Denise. Richard took a box without complaint. Annie watched him from the shoe table. A year ago, he had stood beneath lights and spoken like a man giving mercy from above. Now he carried boxes beside retirees, church ladies, students, and former Harborview workers who had become volunteers after their claims were reopened. He looked less impressive this way, which made him more useful. Denise noticed Annie watching. He's learning. He's slow, Annie said. Denise adjusted her cane. Most people are, baby. The question is whether they keep learning after nobody praises them for lesson 1. By mid-morning, the hall filled with the sounds of winter being answered in practical ways. Soup ladled into bowls, paper forms sliding across tables, shoeboxes opening, volunteers saying, yes, ma'am, right this way. Take your time. We're open late. You can come back after your shift. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but no one at the door was told to come back next year. Near noon, Richard approached Annie's table carrying a box of children's boots by mistake. Annie raised an eyebrow. Wrong table, she said. I was following Martha's instructions. That explains the fear in your eyes. Richard set the box down and allowed himself a small smile. How are you, pussy? That's good. It is. He looked around the hall. Do you think it's working? Annie did not answer right away. She watched a man try on boots, then stand carefully as if testing whether the floor might finally meet him kindly. She watched Denise help a woman fill out a medical referral form. She watched Martha scold a donor for trying to take a picture without asking. She watched Samuel kneel to tie a boot for an older veteran whose fingers shook too much to manage the laces. It's starting, Annie said. Richard nodded. Starting is better than ending when the trucks leave. Yes. A quiet passed between them. Then Richard said, There's something I wanted you to see. He led her to the side wall near the entrance, where a small frame had been mounted that morning. Annie had been too busy to notice. Inside the frame was not a photograph of Richard, not a check, not a ribbon from an opening ceremony. It held Denise's old taped shoes, cleaned but not repaired, placed beside a plain card. Annie stepped closer. The card read, No one should have to bleed before the world believes they are hurting. For a moment, she could not speak. Richard stood a few feet away, giving her room. Your mother approved it. Ruth approved the wording. Martha said if I made it about myself, she'd take it down with a crowbar. She would. Yes. Annie looked at the shoes. She remembered them by the heater in the apartment, bent inward, tired from years of work. She remembered putting them by her mother's uniform. She remembered the bus, the cold pavement, the parking lot light, Victoria's hand, the fall, the shame. She remembered asking for something small because small was all she dared expect. Denise came to stand beside her. You okay? Denise asked. Annie nodded, then shook her head, then gave up deciding. I don't know. That's allowed. Annie touched the edge of the frame, not the shoes. I hated these. I did too, Denise said. Now everyone will see them. Not everyone, just people who come in here needing to know they are not the first to be tired. Annie swallowed. I don't want to be remembered as the girl with no shoes. Denise put an arm around her. Then don't be. Be the woman who made sure somebody else got a pair. Richard looked down at the floor. Annie turned to him. You didn't put my name there. No. Thank you. It wasn't mine to put. Martha's voice carried from across the room. Annie. I need someone with sense at table 3. Annie wiped under one eye and laughed softly. That means me? Denise said. It surely doesn't mean Martha. Annie went back to work. Later that afternoon, just before the late shift hours began, a young woman in a grocery store uniform came through the door, embarrassed, still wearing her work badge. I'm sorry, she told the volunteer at registration. I know I'm late. Annie heard the words from the shoe table. She crossed the hall before anyone else could answer. You're not late, Annie said. The young woman looked confused. But I thought this started this morning. It did. And it's still here. I just got off work. I figured. The young woman's eyes moved toward the rows of shoes. I don't need much. Annie felt the old ache under her ribs, but it no longer owned the room. You don't have to make it smaller for us to take it seriously. The young woman blinked, then nodded. Annie picked up the clipboard. What size? 7. Then we'll find 7. Across the hall, Richard watched her. Samuel stood beside him with 2 cups of coffee. She said the thing right, Samuel said. Richard nodded. Better than I ever did. Samuel handed him a cup. That's why you listen before speaking. Richard accepted the coffee. You planning to teach me forever? If necessary, sir. Richard smiled a little. It may be. As evening settled over Greenwich, more people arrived after work. No one rushed them. No one pointed to packed trucks. No one said the words next year. Soup stayed hot. Coffee kept brewing. The legal table remained open. The medical volunteers stayed past their scheduled time because Martha stood nearby with a look that made leaving feel morally risky. Annie moved from table to table, helping where she could. Once, she caught sight of Richard lifting another box and Martha correcting his posture. Denise laughed from her chair. Samuel shook his head. The sound filled Annie with something unfamiliar, not relief exactly, not joy without memory, but a steadier kind of hope. One that knew what had happened and still chose to stay. Near closing, Richard came to the shoe table again. Annie, he said. She looked up. Yes, Mr. Whitmore? Do you remember what you asked me for that night? Of course. Old shoes. She gave him a small smile. Even old shoes would do. He looked around the hall, then back at her. You asked for old shoes, and you gave me a reason to stop calling charity finished, just because the lights were off. Annie rested the clipboard against the table. I didn't give you anything. I just showed up late. No, Richard said. You showed up after we had stopped looking. Annie considered that. Then she nodded toward the entrance, where another tired worker was stepping in from the snow. Then keep looking, she said. Richard followed her gaze. I will. Outside, the night grew colder. Inside, someone laughed near the coffee table. A volunteer found the right size boots for a man who had expected to be told they were out, and Denise Johnson stood carefully to help Martha fold a stack of blankets despite Martha telling her to sit down. Annie watched her mother, then the framed shoes on the wall, then the open door where snow blew in each time someone entered. A year ago, she had walked toward a bus stop in shoes too large for her, carrying help that felt like trouble. Tonight, she stood in the same building as people arrived late, tired, embarrassed, and cold, and she could tell them the truth she had needed to hear. Come in. You are not too late. We still have something left. The lesson of Annie's story is that kindness should not depend on cameras, applause, or convenience. True compassion begins when no one is watching, and when helping someone may cost us comfort, pride, or reputation. Annie did not ask for much, only old shoes, but her pain revealed a deeper truth. Poor people should not have to prove they are suffering before they are treated with dignity. The story reminds us that justice is not charity. Charity gives what is left over, but justice asks why someone was left barefoot in the first place. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real, and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.